put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
A very good afternoon to you and a happy Good Friday. Welcome to the show. It's 3 p.m. I'm Martin Daubney and this is GB News, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster all across the UK. Today, Sir Geoffrey Donaldson has quit as leader of the Democratic Unionist Party after being charged with historical sex offences. Next up, Sir Keir Starmer warns cash-strapped councils that there's no magic money tree. And there's more bad news for Rishi Sunak also today. And in shocking scenes that have captivated the nation and got you sending hundreds of emails into us here at GB News, 300 kids ran amok in a shopping centre in Milton Keynes. What on earth is going on in our country? And Prince Harry had to ask Queen Elizabeth for permission to have a beard when he got married. Well, guess what? Now the army is lifting its 100-year ban on soldiers having facial fuzz. That's all coming up in your next hour. Welcome to the show. I hope your Easter is getting off to a cracking start. Now, you've got to check out this video of these 300 kids in Milton Keynes in a shopping centre. A pre-organised, premeditated event, clearly. Ransacking stores, shoving over security guards, laughing about it, finding it funny, filming it. A country represented by these kids is a country, I would argue, with a serious problem. Where are the parents? Where are the consequences? Where are the coppers? Where is the respect? I want you to get your emails in today. I've already had hundreds in before the show's even started. It's got you rattling off of your chairs this Easter. I want to know from you, what should we do about a broken generation? What should we do about these kids? What should we do about the parents? Particularly if you live in the Milton Keynes area, let me know the usual ways. Email me, gbviews@gbnews.com. But first, it's time for your latest news headlines with Sophia Wenzer.
Thanks, Martin. Good afternoon. It's 2 minutes past 3. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. Your top story this hour. Sir Geoffrey Donaldson has stepped down as leader of the Democratic Unionist Party after he was charged with sex offences of a historical nature. The DUP has also suspended Mr Donaldson from membership pending the outcome of the judicial process, which they say is in accordance with party rules. They've now appointed Gavin Robinson as interim leader. A 57-year-old woman has been charged with aiding and abetting additional offences in relation to the same police investigation. Sir Geoffrey was elected to Parliament in 1997 and is the longest-serving MP in Northern Ireland. One of the Conservative Party's major donors has received a knighthood as part of a surprise honours list from Rishi Sunak. Mohammed Mansour gave £5 million to the Tories last year and is a senior treasurer for the party. He was knighted for what's described as services to business, charity and politics. Other recipients include MP Philip Davies, who is also a former presenter on this network. The timing of the list is unusual, coming while Parliament is in recess and on the eve of the Easter bank holiday weekend. We asked people in Hull what they think of the Tory MPs receiving honours.
Think much of anything. One or two of them most probably try, but to me, majority of MPs are like bananas. They're bunched together, they're all yellow, there's not a straight one among them.
But it's self-serving, isn't it? I mean, these people reward themselves for what? I don't quite understand. I don't get it.
It's just a con, really. You know, it's to just they give the Conservative or the Labour Party money for they want favours in return. So this is the problem.
Documents have revealed that the Post Office was aware of errors in its Horizon IT system, despite bosses proceeding with prosecutions. More than 900 sub-postmasters were wrongly prosecuted due to supposed losses flagged by a faulty computer system. A draft report carried out by Deloitte was commissioned by the Post Office in 2016. It shows that top managers knew that financial discrepancies may not be the fault of sub-postmasters, but they continue to fight them in court regardless. A spokesperson for the Post Office says it remains fully focused on supporting the inquiry. Police are appealing for help in their search for a man suspected of raping 2 women in London in separate incidents 4 years apart. The first attack took place in Westminster in 2018, followed by another incident in Shoreditch in 2022. The offences were being investigated as separate crimes, but forensic work helped draw a link between them. The Met has released an EFIT image. Anyone who thinks they may have information is urged to contact police or Crime Stoppers. In other news, the task of clearing Baltimore's port will take considerable time after President Biden committed $60 million to rebuilding the collapsed bridge. It's after a cargo ship crashed into one of the key bridge's foundations on Tuesday. The enormous wreckage remains in the port, with the ship measuring about as long as the Eiffel Tower. Maryland's Governor Wes Moore says they're facing an incredibly complex job to reopen the port. And soldiers and officers in the British Army are now allowed to grow beards after a century-old rule was overturned. The changes come after an official review of the military's appearance policy. Under the new rules, beards and moustaches must be groomed, kept within a specific length and have routine checks. The Defence Secretary Grant Shapps praised the shift in culture, saying it's important the military keeps up with modern standards. And there's been congestion on Britain's roads as holidaymakers set off for the Easter holiday. Motorists have described horrendous queues stretching up to 20 miles, in some cases adding an extra 45 minutes to journey times. 2.6 million car journeys are expected today, with the M25 and southwest routes particularly busy. The RAC says people en route to seaside destinations in Devon and Cornwall could be in for some especially bad traffic. Visit England expects a total 11 million trips over the weekend, injecting £3 billion into British tourism. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's...
OK, thank you, Sophia. Now we start with the news that Sir Geoffrey Donaldson has quit as leader of the Democratic Unionist Party after he was charged with historical sex offences. Gavin Robertson has been appointed the interim party leader, and I'm joined now by our Northern Ireland reporter, Dougie Beattie. Dougie, what's the latest on this story?
Well, it has been politically ground-shattering here in Northern Ireland. Sir Geoffrey Donaldson is the longest-serving parliamentarian in Northern Ireland, and he brings a wealth of experience with him. Now, yesterday morning at about 10 o'clock, I got word that these arrests had taken place. And to show you just how quiet it was kept, I was phoning members, senior members of the DUP, asking and trying to stand this story up. And it wasn't until one of them said to me that he was due at a breakfast function in Lisburn that he didn't turn up to, and he never ever does that the pennies started to drop, and then it started to gather momentum. Now, for senior party members not to know that this was going on in the background, it shows you how quiet it was actually being kept and how seriously it was, because after he was arrested, he was taken to one of the busiest crime suites in Northern Ireland. So you can imagine if they weren't going to charge him, they'd have done it very quietly. But Sir Geoffrey started his political rise, I suppose, back in the early 90s under David Trimble in the Ulster Unionist Party. He opposed the Good Friday Agreement in 1998, and then near enough to the day, left that party and came into the Democratic Unionist Party. It's a very conservative party, and it is the largest unionist party in Northern Ireland. So it holds quite a lot of power here. And the power-sharing executive is only back into place just over a month and a half ago. And there is now looking at how friction will happen amongst the party, because who is going to replace someone of that political knowledge and wisdom while he is suspended from the party? He has been stepped down from the political leadership. Gavin Robertson has taken that over. He is the MP for this area. And you've got to remember as well that the DUP is the 5th largest party in Westminster, so holds quite a lot of sway, and indeed that was brought to the forefront with Theresa May's coalition that she had when she needed the unionists to back up her government. So it is quite a political shake today, not just in Northern Ireland, but across the whole of the UK.
OK, Dougie Beattie, thank you for that update live from Belfast. Well, yesterday we talked a lot about Sir Keir Starmer and in particular his support for banning protests outside schools. Of course, we got him to talk about Batley. But there was one other comment from Sir Keir Starmer that I want to focus on now, and that's this, because with the country drowning in around £2.7 trillion of national debt, the Labour leader warned that there is no magic money tree. That's the opposite, you remember, of what Jeremy Corbyn used to dangle. And I'm joined now in our studio in Westminster by our political correspondent, Catherine Forster. Catherine, welcome to the studio. Always a pleasure. Is the penny finally beginning to drop that the country is potless? And if people are expecting suddenly a new regime, if the Labour Party get in, to magic up a huge transition in the country, maybe Starmer is starting to realise that's just a forlorn dream.
Yes, it's a bit like there's no money left. When Labour left in 2010, they left the note for the Conservatives, sorry, there's no money left. And pretty much now, 14 years later, it looks like the picture is very much the same, because national debt 2.7 trillion, as you say. And so despite all the things that Labour would like to do, they're starting to be fairly open now that it's not going to be possible for people to have transformed public services, lower taxes, all the things that we might like, all the things that are not working well, can't be turned around very quickly. So, yes, it sounds extremely likely there will be a new government by the end of the year. But in terms of things changing quickly, don't hold your breath, because they simply are going to have the same financial constraints that the Conservatives have, and there is going to be no quick and immediate transformation, unfortunately. And it's worth pointing out that letter, that fabled letter, which still haunts Liam Byrne to this day. In 2010, the country was a mere 980 billion in debt. Now, we're almost nudging 3 times that now, so the pot, the biscuit tin, really is empty. I want to talk about another story now, and that's a poll out today. The Reform Party seems to be surging ahead. It was on 14% nationally, but there's some more granular detail about where they're particularly landing well. Catherine, what's going on? Yes, so it's basically saying that amongst working class voters, Reform is now ahead of the Conservatives. They're also ahead of the Conservatives in the north. They're also ahead of the Conservatives when it comes to men voting. So this is really horrendous news for Rishi Sunak, because, of course, Boris Johnson got that 80-seat majority through reaching out to the Red Wall, taking those people that had voted Labour, that lent their vote to the Conservatives. And it sounds very much like they're not going to be lending those votes to the Conservatives this time. They're going to be lending their votes to Reform. It'll probably increase a Labour majority. The Conservatives beside themselves with worry about this. Some suggestions now that they could try and effectively buy off Nigel Farage, because if Nigel Farage comes back to lead the party, they would go even higher in the polls. So some saying, well, why don't we offer him, you know, UK ambassador to the United States? He's got an incredibly good relationship with Trump. That hasn't been ruled out. Labour now piling in and saying, well, Rishi Sunak needs to say, no, this absolutely won't happen, because they're saying comments that Nigel Farage has made about Russia and Ukraine, etc., etc. There's an election looming, and my goodness, we're all feeling it, aren't we?
We are, but it's great stuff to talk about. Thank you for joining us in the studio, Catherine Forster. And let's discuss this further now with the pollster and the director of JL Partners, and that's Scarlett Maguire. Scarlett, welcome to the show. So we're just diving into some of that detail there. Conservatives are way behind. They're at about 20, 21, 22, depending on which poll you believe. Labour between 44 and 40. Meanwhile, on the inside, charging up in the turquoise hat, the Reform Party. What's happening?
Yeah, so polls have been remarkably static, actually, for more than the last year, more like for the last 18 months, with the sort of Conservatives about 20 points behind Labour, Lib Dems on about 10%, and not much movement there. In fact, the only movement really in headline voting intention polls has been this surge in support for reform. There are some debates amongst pollsters about where they started and where they've ended up, and whether they really are on the sort of 14, 15% that we're now starting to be seeing recorded. But I think what's indisputable is that all polls basically show them doubling their vote share since November. And crucially for Rishi Sunak, this is disproportionately coming from Conservative voters. They are barely peeling off any Labour voters at all. So this is damage that they will do to the Conservative Party.
And Scarlett, what's particularly telling is when you dive into target areas amongst certain tranches of the electorate. We're just saying the CDEs, they call them the working classes. Reform are actually ahead with the Conservatives in a poll out today on 23% versus the Conservatives on 22%. This, of course, is Mr and Mrs Red Wall. And last time round, that's where the election was won and lost.
This should be of increasing concern to Rishi Sunak. It's not just the poll that was out today. There was also a poll out last week that saw Reform just 4 points behind the Conservatives, and again leading, as you quite rightly said, with working class voters and with male voters. That's what that poll had. It spells real trouble, and what we know from our data as well is, yes, it's going to be an issue in the Red Wall, but it's actually going to be an issue for Rishi Sunak all over the country. These voters are not geographically concentrated per se, and they look a lot just like disgruntled Conservative voters, which means not only will Reform help hand seats to Labour by taking votes off the Conservatives in the Red Wall, but they could also do the same to the sort of Liberal Democrats challengers in the Blue Wall too.
Precisely, Scarlett. They'll be facing a pincer movement from the Reform in the Red Wall and then from the Lib Dems in the Blue Wall. The net effect, we were talking this week here in Britain, Sir John Curtis, saying there's now only a 1% chance, he believes, of the Conservatives winning the next general election. So I guess now we're looking at the size of the majority, the size of the wipeout and the magnitude of what appears to be a coming forest fire.
Barring a sort of massive black swan event, that is exactly what we're looking at. I think most, not just pollsters, but most politics, most conversations there have moved towards talking about how big a Labour majority might be. And that's a really open-ended question at the moment. I'd say that hinges on two things. Firstly, how well Labour can do in Scotland, how much of the SNP's vote share they can take there. And then secondly, on just how well Reform perform in a general election. The Blackpool South by-election we've got coming up should be a very good marker to try and see how strong Reform support really is.
Yeah, and then the big question, I guess, Scarlett, we've seen time and time again, can this translate into any seats at the general election? Of course, 4 million votes for UKIP didn't quite work through. The Brexit Party at one point, I mean, I stood for them. We're polling at over 20%. It didn't actually manifest itself in any seats. Do you think that could be different this time, Scott? Do you think the dissatisfaction with the Conservatives, with their own traditional base, is so high we could see a change?
It's still a very tall order in our first past the post system. You're quite right to talk about how UKIP performed in 2015, still not resulting in a single constituency. There was a poll a few months ago that showed if Nigel Farage specifically, rather than just a generic Reform Party candidate, ran in Clacton, that they could win. So we might, maybe, I don't think it's impossible, but it's definitely difficult for them. But nevertheless, they can have a huge impact on this election result without getting a single MP.
Great stuff, Scarlett Maguire, who's the pollster and the director of JL Partners. Thanks for joining us, and apologies for being interrupted by Nigel Farage's laugh there, but I'm sure you won't mind. Now, it's your final chance today to win our massive spring giveaway with gadgets, a shopping spree and a whopping £12,345 in cash, tax-free, up for grabs. Lines close at 5 p.m. today, so just under 2 hours left. So make sure that you don't miss out. And here's all the entry details you need.
It's the final day to see how you could win big.
I'm Charles. I'm on £18,000 cash. I sent a text through my mobile phone. It was just amazing. As soon as it goes into your bank account, it's fantastic.
There's a massive £12,345 in tax-free cash to spend however you like, along with £500 in shopping vouchers. You'll also get a garden gadget package. You have to hurry, as lines close at 5 p.m. today. For another chance to win the vouchers, the treats, and £12,345 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB03 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. today. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if watching or listening on demand. Good luck.
Yes, look here now. Look, disgraceful scenes as 300 kids ran amok in a shopping centre in Milton Keynes. Where are the parents? Where were the coppers? Where were the consequences? We'll have that next. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Dubes & Co. Weekdays from 6 p.m.
This story caught my eye. Lloyds Bank, right, they own the insurance company Scottish Widows. They have now issued some kind of suggested guidance about which word to try and avoid upsetting people or perhaps be as inclusive as possibly can be. One of these words is widows, which really caught my eye because of the amount of stupidity. If you own a brand literally called Scottish Widows, you can't then be saying that the word widows is triggering and offensive. Anyway, because it is so ludicrous, I need to move over from that part because I want to talk about the broader issue. So many organisations, they have what they call ESG. I'm going to bring a graphic up on the screen in case you're not familiar with what this is. But it's a sense of kind of government, and I would say it's almost like a spine. It underpins so much of what business does today. It stands for environmental, social and governance. And it's around things like how does a business perform when it comes to their environmental impact? How diverse are their employees? How diverse is their board? And so on and so forth. Do you think ESG is a force for good and much needed within business or not, Ben?
It is the introduction of systemic institutionalised prejudice in the United Kingdom, which is going to damage dreadfully our economy, but also our culture, our cohesion as a society, and it's undermining, again, coming back to it, the nation-state that is the United Kingdom. ESG has to be ditched.
Strong words. Judita, do you agree with him?
I don't agree, because I think that with ESG, when you have them, what you're having an increase in is specialists in ESG being introduced into companies to kind of imbricate it into how the company functions. If you're moving in a direction of making your company's functionality be optimized in a way that is inclusive of anyone from any background who has the qualifications to occupy that position, that is a good thing.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free. I'm Mark Dolan and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Welcome back. It's 3:23 and I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News. Now, later in the show, I'll mark the first anniversary of Humza Yousaf becoming Scotland's First Minister. And it's fair to say he's not had the best of years. Now, more than 2.5 million car journeys are expected to be made today. And guess what? The good old British weather is making life even more difficult for travellers, with Storm Nelson hitting parts of the country. Well, our West Midlands reporter Jack Carson is above the M6 motorway near Walsall. Jack, you get all the glamour gigs. What's the latest?
Well, certainly here on the M6, traffic has eased a lot from the congestion we were seeing here earlier, particularly southbound here on the M6. There was a lot of congestion around junction 10. That now seems to have eased. Traffic southbound and northbound seemingly flowing a lot better than it was earlier. We knew that rush was going to come earlier in the day as people started to head on their travels for Good Friday. We knew around 2.6 million people, according to research and data from the RAC, would be travelling today on Good Friday. Many of those may well still be yet to travel, of course, as it gets later into the afternoon now where we are in the evening. Probably show you some pictures as well of some parts of the M1 earlier for those people listening on radio that was really, really busy. A lot of congestion there as well, and it's been a point which a lot of motorways across the country have suffered today. We know there was some accidents around the M4 that was causing some big congestion around Bristol earlier, as well as the west side of the M25 as well, as expected, with those people making all of their journeys today. As I said, 2.6 million people expected to make leisure trips today. A lot of those may be including down to the likes of the Port of Dover. We know, we say this every year, don't we? See the huge queues at the likes of Dover. The advice to, of course, make sure to take the main routes into that port. Some queues earlier this morning were around 2 hours, but they seem to have eased a little bit better now as well as we head towards the evening, when, of course, the advice really is to travel outside of maybe those traditional times to try and get yourself the best chance of avoiding that congestion. But for a lot of people, they've still managed to fall into that trap and fall into that congestion. We know as well, because of some issues on the railway lines, that's forced a few more people on the roads as well, particularly between London Euston and Milton Keynes, with the West Coast main line there closed for work on the line there. So that's caused some big issues, and particularly as well leaving a lot of Manchester United fans stranded there. They've got a game against Brentford later this evening. The last train for them to be able to get back to Manchester Piccadilly leaves St Pancras Station 2 minutes after kick-off. So a lot of Manchester United fans that have travelled down today having to make alternative arrangements. They've probably travelled down by car because of the issues on the railway line. So that has maybe caused a bit more, more problems, on the roads, than traditionally or other Good Fridays. But the RAC also say that around 1 in 10 people still haven't actually decided exactly when over this Easter period they are maybe going to make their journey and make their travel. So that means that 3.3 million extra journeys on top of the likes of the 2.6 million journeys that we're seeing today could be taking place over the next few days. So certainly still some busy days of travel to come. Certainly just for today, though, traffic seems to be easing, but of course still plenty of time for some congestion, especially if we get some unfortunate accidents on some of the motorways. These things can very quickly turn, and traffic, once again, can well be blocked up, Martin.
Thank you, Jack Carson. Above the M6, I'll be hitting the M4 tomorrow. And here's my technique of avoiding traffic. I moan so much about it, the missus drives. It works for me every single time. Now, moving on, if you want to sum up the sorry state of this country, then a video of hundreds of kids running amok in a shopping centre surely does that. The children clashed with security staff in Milton Keynes yesterday. Police issued a dispersal order after the incident, which involved around 300 youngsters, went viral on social media. Now, it's fair to say this has raised your shackles. We've had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of emails on this. If you're listening on the radio, on your screens now, you can see 300 kids, all teens, all in their hoodies, shoving security guards, running amok, finding it all funny, disgraceful scenes. They had to close shops. They sent staff home. They seemed totally out of control. Now, earlier on in the show, I specifically said, do you live in Milton Keynes? Has this impacted you? And you've been in touch in your droves. I'd like to read out a few of those emails now. Simon says this: I used to live there and not that far away now. The decline in Milton Keynes over the last 20 years is absolutely shocking. Total breakdown of any social order. People don't understand how bad things have got. In Milton Keynes, we've imported loads of social problems from London. We've become an overflow. This place is going to the dogs. Jess adds this: is it any wonder why Jess, all the way, by the way, also lives in Milton Keynes. Jess says, is it any wonder why I scrimp and save to send my school to a private school, which I probably won't be able to afford if a Labour government were to get in? We live in a village soon to be joined up to MK with thousands of new houses. And to be honest, Martin, I'm simply too scared to let my son into central Milton Keynes on his own these days with his mates. I'm not remotely surprised what you're seeing on your screen. This has been a long time in the coming. Andrew adds this: this is not great at all. I live in Milton Keynes and my daughter works in that shopping centre you can see on your screens. Yesterday, the police just told her to close the shop. They closed the shop. She couldn't even work. They did not want to close the shop, but the police said that was the most effective strategy. It feels to me, Martin, like the police have totally lost control of Milton Keynes, and they certainly totally lost control of this shopping centre yesterday. Cass says this quickly: I also live in Milton Keynes, and this looks like Lord of the Flies. It's totally and utterly out of control. And believe me, ladies and gentlemen, that was a mere sample of the emails we've had in on this. It's completely got you going. And please send your emails in, gbviews@gbnews.com. We'll get through as many as we can throughout the show. I'll also speak to a former Metropolitan Police officer who knows all about how to handle these sort of situations. And I'll speak to Bobby Siegel, a teacher, on the declining standards in the classroom. Is it the school's fault? Or actually, should the parents take more responsibility for the types of kids they're putting into the schools? And then we see these sort of chaotic scenes on our streets. A video which I think sums up the state of our nation. Now, there's loads more still to come between now and 4 o'clock, and I'll tell you why the Army has lifted a 100-year ban. But first, it's time for your latest news headlines with Sam Francis.
Martin, thank you, and a very good afternoon from the GB newsroom. Just coming up to 3:32, and we start with the top story of the day. Sir Geoffrey Donaldson has stepped down as the leader of the Democratic Unionist Party after he was charged with historical sex offences. He's also been suspended from the party pending the outcome of the legal process. A 57-year-old woman has also been charged with aiding and abetting additional offences in relation to that same police investigation. Sir Geoffrey was elected to Parliament in 1997 and is the longest-serving MP in Northern Ireland. They've now, though, appointed Gavin Robinson as the interim leader. One of the Conservative Party's major donors has received a knighthood as part of a controversial honours list from Rishi Sunak. Mohammed Mansour gave £5 million to the Tories last year and is a senior treasurer for the party. He was knighted for what's described as services to business, to charity and politics. A man has been charged with 2 counts of attempted murder after an alleged stabbing at Kennington Underground Station in London. Nicholas Orlando Green, who's 35, has been remanded in custody and will appear at Highbury Corner Magistrates Court tomorrow. He's also charged with possession of a bladed article and 1 count of sexual assault after a member of the public reported being groped as the suspect left the station. And there's been congestion on Britain's roads as holidaymakers set off for the Easter holidays. Motorists have described horrendous queues stretching up to 20 miles, in some cases adding an extra 45 minutes to journey times. Some 2.6 million car journeys are expected today, with the M25 and southwest routes particularly busy. Meanwhile, the RAC says people en route to seaside destinations in Devon and Cornwall could be in for some especially bad traffic, with Visit England expecting a total of 11 million trips over the weekend, injecting a projected £3 billion into British tourism. Those are the headlines, more in the next half hour. In the meantime, you can sign up to GB News Alerts. Just scan the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sam. Now, a controversial child gender clinic is closing for good this weekend, 2 years after a damning report highlighted major concerns. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Samantha Dean. In Renfrewshire, the M8 westbound one lane's closed, queuing traffic due to emergency barrier repairs from junction 29 at Paisley to junction 30 at Erskine Bridge, congestion to junction 27 at Renfrew. In Lancashire, the M6 northbound, long delays due to an earlier accident between Lancaster services and junction 33 Preston Lancaster Road, Lancaster South. All lanes have reopened. At Market Deeping in Lincolnshire, the A1175 is closed in both directions, slow traffic due to an accident between the Baston Fen turnoff and the Deeping St James turnoff. And in Berkshire, the M4 westbound, severe delays at junction 30 and the A34 at Cheveley. That's in the roadworks area. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Patrick Christie's Tonight, weekdays from 9 p.m.
Has the NHS killed your relative and then lied to you about it? There is an alleged cover-up culture in the NHS. They lie to you about why your loved one died, about poor care, then bury documents with evidence in them, and they try to silence staff who speak out. This is according to the NHS Ombudsman. There are around 11,000 avoidable deaths every year. 11,000. Someone's mum dies, their children know something dodgy happened, and then they're met with a rotten culture, including the altering of care plans, the disappearance of crucial documents, and complete denials. They lie to you, but they really get away with it because the NHS is like a religion, and people dare not criticise it. You'd be accused of NHSophobia. The annual budget is around £180 billion, and we now have about 2 million people working for the NHS. They cannot keep blaming everything on being underfunded and understaffed. If they're covering up medical negligence, it means the problem doesn't get dealt with and it keeps happening. And that is the fault of the NHS managers, the people who run it. They've got the money for 837 non-clinical staff working at English hospitals on the highest paid Band 9 contracts, which is between £99,000 and £115,000 a year. How many nurses would that pay for? How many junior doctors? And they've got the time on their hands to think about making the NHS the world's first carbon-neutral health service. They've got time to consider whether women in labour should be picked up by an electric ambulance that might have to be recharged en route to the hospital. There are NHS managers with a budget of £180 billion, 2 million members of staff, and they're crying about being understaffed and under-resourced. If they spent more time looking after patients instead of finding ways to cover up avoidable deaths, then maybe we'd have a better health service.
Welcome back. The time is 3:37 and I'm Martin Daubney and this is GB News. Now, the controversial Tavistock Gender Identity Development Service is closing for good this weekend, 2 years after a damning report highlighted major concerns. Our reporter Ray Addison has been looking back at the history of the NHS Gender Clinic.
The Tavistock Gender Identity Clinic will finally close its doors on Sunday. It follows severe criticism that it gave some of the most vulnerable members of society treatments that lacked sufficient safety or clinical effectiveness. It was the brainchild of psychiatrist Dr. Domenico DeCelli, inspired by a single case of a teenager who claimed she was a boy in a female body.
He told me, when I was a child, I had all these differences, and my parents should have seen it. Why didn't they do anything about it? But that implanted me the idea of creating a service for children and adolescents.
From its launch in 1989, with just a handful of referrals, it grew into the largest children's gender clinic in the world, referring around 2,000 for puberty blockers, but failing to follow up to see how they were doing. It also ignored the concerns of staff, some of whom became whistleblowers. Formal concerns were first raised in 2005 by therapist Sue Evans.
My concerns back then was actually around a 16-year-old child that I had seen referred after 4 sessions for a hormone therapy treatment. It is strange that such a powerful medication could be given on such a small level of assessment.
Yes.
2/3 of the clinic's patients were female, and they often had an underlying mental health condition. But the clinic stopped providing therapy and focused on a medical pathway. There was also concern that patient support groups, such as transgender charity Mermaids, had undue influence, which they've denied. In 2018, a devastating report by Dr. David Bell concluded that the service was not fit for purpose. The following year, a legal challenge brought by former patient Kira Bell questioned if children could properly consent to treatment. That ultimately failed, but it caught the attention of the media.
My hope was that outside of the noise of the culture wars, support would shine a light on this harmful experiment on vulnerable children and young people. These drugs seriously harm me in more ways than one, and they have harmed many more, particularly young girls and women.
In September 2020, NHS England announced an independent review by Dr. Hilary Cass. She found that options other than gender transitioning were not being explored, and staff felt under pressure not to question parents' and children's assumptions. Finally, in July 2022, NHS England announced it would be closing the clinic and opening new regional services offering psychosocial and psychological support, but not medical. For some, the closure will come too late, their bodies forever changed by an NHS service which failed to protect them.
Well, an excellent report on a hugely controversial talking point there. Ray Addison joins us now from outside the Tavistock clinic. Great work there, Ray. The big question now is there are more than 15,000 people, though, Ray, waiting for gender identity clinic appointments. With the Tavistock closing, what happens to them now?
Well, absolutely. That number, Martin, that 15,000, they're actually waiting for their first appointment. So they haven't been had that very first consultation at all. And so NHS England has replaced the gender clinic here at Tavistock with a regional service. So the plan ultimately is to have 8 clinics all around the regions of England to provide those services for people specifically where they're based. Now, at the moment, only 2 of those regional services are in operation, or rather one. The Great Ormond Street Hospital here in London is operating a service, and they're going to see a deluge of people coming onto their waiting lists. And also a second hub is about to open in the northwest of England. That's going to be managed by Alderhay Hospital. Also, what we're seeing, and this has raised some concern, you saw Sue Evans in that report there, the original whistleblower back in 2005. There's been a number now of private clinics that are opening or due to open, including some opened by former staff who worked here at the service. And there's concern, Sue certainly telling me that she was concerned that this they're obviously still allowed to prescribe these puberty blockers, and they're kind of still going along, some, maybe not all, with the ideology rather of that Tavistock was previously operating under. Now, of course, many people have been upset at this closure. You know, there was those that think that the clinic here was providing an absolutely essential
essential service, possibly even life-saving for young people who are determined to transition and just feel like they can't go on unless they transition to another gender. Others, of course, believe it was consumed by that ideology that I mentioned, this affirmation approach, agreeing with the young person, yes, you're in the wrong body and we're going to help you change. However, there's that concern that it just overrode the clinical need for proper medical ethics and standards. Ultimately, we know here at Tavistock children were receiving life-changing puberty blockers, life-changing hormone treatments instead of psychological treatment. No psychological treatment at all for the young people to explore other options other than transitioning. And right now, 15,000 people are waiting on that list, and they'll be waiting for these services around the UK.
Ray Addison, excellent report on a complex issue from outside the Tavistock clinic. And a lot of people will be arguing that perhaps we should have undergone more thorough psychological analysis and appraisal before going down the route of hormones and surgery. Great talking point to go over there. Now, after 100 years, the Army is finally lifting a ban on soldiers having beards. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast on the Met Office. Well, this Easter weekend, for many of us, we will see some sunshine, but there will still be some rain around. It's all courtesy of this area of low pressure. It's going to hang around for the long weekend, but with winds coming in from the south, it should feel a little bit less cold than it has been of late. So for the rest of Good Friday, showers becoming increasingly restricted to more western and northern parts of the country. Central and eastern parts turning dry overnight. Could just see a few misty patches come dawn, and also a touch of ground frost with temperatures falling down to about 3 to 4 degrees. But where we do see the chilly conditions first thing Saturday morning, we will see some sunshine. Just keeping an eye on this area of rain. It could just fringe the far east of East Anglia for a time, but I think for most of us, really, it's going to be a day of sunny spells and a few showers. Showers a little bit fewer and further between compared to today, with the main focus across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. But in the sunshine, feeling pleasant enough, highs reaching around 14 or 15 degrees. Then looking ahead to Easter Day, again, another day of sunny spells and showers. Showers probably, again, restricted to Northern Ireland, with fewer and further showers the further east you go. In the sunshine, feeling pleasantly warm, highs reaching around 16 degrees. And then looking ahead to Easter Monday, it looks like another band of rain moving up from the south.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel. Welcome back. It's 3:47. I'm Martin Daubney, and this is GB News. Now at 4 o'clock, I have the latest on the controversy surrounding Angela Rayner. But before that, the British Army has overturned a 100-year ban on beards after the King signed off on the decision to allow both officers and soldiers to have facial hair. Now, if you recall, Prince Harry famously had to ask for Queen Elizabeth's permission to have a beard when he got married in his army uniform. Now, the latest move will bring the Army into line with the Royal Navy and the RAF, who already permit facial fuzz. Well, I'm joined now by the former Defence Minister, Bill Rammell. Bill, welcome to the show. Always a pleasure, and I hope you're having a wonderful Easter. What's your take on this? Is this long overdue?
Yes,
is it a step too far? Is it showing a slip in standards? Or is it about moving with the times?
It's very much about long overdue moving with the times. It's a sensible change. Of course, as long as a beard is neat and well trimmed, of course, soldiers should be able to do that while serving in the army, as you said, as they currently can in the RAF and the Navy. But what I would say is never underestimate the conservatism with a small c of the senior military who block sensible changes. I mean, I remember when I was trying to push through the right of women to fight in frontline combat roles, and the resistance from the senior military was frankly breathtaking. Arguments like when you're in the field of combat, if a woman fell, men who are chivalrous would naturally try to pick her up when that was against the rules of engagement. It was like arguments from the Dark Ages. And given the recruitment crisis that we've got in the army, we need to blow away these outdated policies, and the change on beards is one of those.
But interesting, I know we're digressing, Bill, but when that same topic came into the US military and they looked into whether women on the front line was a good idea, there were a lot of studies that did prove that men were putting themselves in danger in mock situations, in training situations, when they were trying to retrieve a body. So that claim did have some veracity, as I recall. Back to this point.
There was different UK research, and actually I think that change has now been pushed through by ministers, and I think it is outdated. But, you know, there's lots of these blockages on recruitment. And when you look at the fact that every army training centre has failed to meet its recruitment targets for each of the last 5 years, and for every 8 soldiers who leave the army, just 5 join, this is a real challenge, and we need to be stopping these blockages on sensible recruitment.
But, Bill, are you seriously suggesting that the Army's recruitment crisis can be solved by saying, hey, come on, if you've got a beard, come and join the Army? Isn't it about other things? For example, calling white men unwanted, or, for example, this continual drive towards diversity, aligned with the fact that GDP spending on defence is so pitifully low. We now have the smallest army since the Napoleonic times.
Well, we have the smallest army, frankly, because of the mismanagement by the current government. We are spending above the NATO requirement of 2% of GDP. And I'm not saying that if you allow people with beards to join the army, you'll suddenly resolve the recruitment crisis. It's about paying conditions. It's about the way soldiers are treated. But having these artificial blockages in place is a further hurdle. Another one, I'll give you an example, is staggeringly, it takes 12 to 18 months in the recruitment process before a soldier can start basic training. That's crazy. You know, we're losing potential talent who could be serving on the front line.
Now, Bill, I want to talk about one thing that a lot of people have been saying this is about, and it's about attracting more Muslims to the army. Now, I've been in touch with senior regimental people today, and they say it's absolutely not about that, because Muslim men can already have beards and be in the army. So I just want to make that point clear. That's your understanding too, right?
That is very much my understanding. And look, I'm 64, but what I notice amongst young guys in their 20s and 30s is almost to a person. They've got a beard. So this is about a sensible change to remove one of those blockages to recruit them.
OK, superb. Thanks for joining us. Former Defence Minister Bill Ramadan, have a fabulous Easter. Now, before we move on, I want to read out a few of your emails. And on this one topic of that video in Milton Keynes, it's absolutely kicked off. Scenes yesterday in a shopping centre, 300 kids running amok, shoving security guards, laughing about it, closing down the shopping centre. The police and security guards seemingly totally overwhelmed and underpowered about what to do with it. Doug has been in touch and said this: these children should have been rounded up and given 50 hours of supervised community service. When all forms of discipline have been taken away from parents, what do you expect? Children have become unruly because certain elements in society have pushed for and passed laws that put the child in charge. Parents have no right to discipline their children anymore, and the child knows this. This is what society has taught them, and this is the payback. You reap what you sow. John says this: the answer to this type of problem is not to fine the parents, as you suggested earlier, Martin. For each so-called child, I personally regard them as hooligans. Courts behaving in this manner, their child benefit should be stopped for at least 3 months and doubled for a second offence. I'm sure that this will impact directly on the reduction of such antisocial behaviour. Mike says this: here's a novel idea. Make children responsible for their actions, as is the case if they are over 10 years old. Put them before the court and ban them from any social media for 6 months. Alice says this: people these days don't want kids or have any parenting skills. Some parents just use their kids as cash cows and they're not interested in them at all. I believe that most people have children too early in life. Virginia adds this: parents should be fined and the kids be put into community service for 1 month cleaning the streets. This is disgusting. If we don't clamp down now, we are heading down into a very dark place. Well, that's certainly got you going. Please keep them coming in. gbviews@gbnews.com. And that's all for this hour, but stay with me as I'll be updating you on the Sir Geoffrey Donaldson situation, stepping down as the leader of the DUP. Plus, we'll have a full insight into reform surging in the polls. Could they represent a red wall revolution for the Tory parties? I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel. But before all of that, it's time for your Easter weather forecast with Craig Snell.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast on the Metawest. Well, this Easter weekend, for many of us, we will see some sunshine, but there will still be some rain around. It's all courtesy of this area of low pressure. It's going to hang around for the long weekend, but with winds coming in from the south, it should feel a little bit less cold than it has been of late. So for the rest of Good Friday, showers becoming increasingly restricted to more western and northern parts of the country. Central and eastern parts turning dry overnight. Good to see a few misty patches come dawn, and also a touch of ground frost with temperatures falling down to about 3 to 4 degrees. But where we do see the chilly conditions first thing Saturday morning, we will see some sunshine. Just keeping an eye on this area of rain. It could just fringe the far east of East Anglia for a time, but I think for most of us, really, it's going to be a day of sunny spells and a few showers. Showers a little bit fewer and further between compared to today, with the main focus across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. But in the sunshine, feeling pleasant enough, highs reaching around 14 or 15 degrees. Then looking ahead to Easter Day, again, another day of sunny spells and showers. Showers probably, again, restricted to Northern Ireland, with fewer and further showers the further east you go. In the sunshine, feeling pleasantly warm, highs reaching around 16 degrees. And then looking ahead to Easter Monday, it looks like another band of rain moving up from the south.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Samantha Dean. In Cheshire, the M62 westbound, there's a lane closed on the entry slip road due to a broken down vehicle. It's at junction 11 at Birchwood Way, but traffic's coping well. In the West Midlands, the M54 eastbound's queuing due to earlier animals in the road before junction 2 Stafford Road at Wolverhampton. Again, all lanes have reopened. Warwickshire, the M40 southbound, one lane closed, queuing traffic due to a vehicle fire from junction 12 at Gaydon to junction 11 at Banbury. And in Hertfordshire, the A1M northbound's closed, queuing traffic due to roadworks until the early hours of Saturday morning from junction 6, the A1000 Welling Bypass Road to junction 7, Stevenage South. Congestion to routes through Nebworth and Woolmer Green as traffic diverts.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Want to be a winner just like Phil?
Obviously, whoever wins it next is going to be as happy as I was, and they're going to get even more money this time round, so why wouldn't you go in the draw?
Enter our massive spring giveaway. There's £12,345 in tax-free cash to give your finances a spring boost. We'll also send you on a shopping spree with £500 worth of vouchers to spend in the store of your choice. You'll also get a garden gadget package. You have to hurry, as lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. For another chance to win the vouchers, the treats, and £12,345 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB03 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if watching or listening on demand. Good luck.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show.
Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else.
We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride.
Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse.
It's news, but it's this close to entertainment.
Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
A very good afternoon to you and a happy Good Friday. It's 4 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster all across the UK. Today, Sir Geoffrey Donaldson has quit as leader of the Democratic Unionist Party after being charged with historical sex offences. Rishi Sunak is under fire after a businessman who gave the Tories £5 million was then awarded a knighthood. And in shocking scenes that have really got you going out there today, 300 kids ran amok in a shopping centre in Milton Keynes, as you can see on your screens now. Simple question is this: what on earth is going on in our country? Are our children totally out of control? And the great Easter getaway has well and truly started. And for some drivers, it's very, very slow going indeed. Carmageddon on the roads. That's all coming in your next hour. Welcome to the show. I hope you're having a cracking Easter so far. This video in Milton Keynes has really, really affected you out there today. Hundreds and hundreds of emails, including loads from people living in and around Milton Keynes who are just telling me the whole place has gone to the dogs in recent years. It's socially changed, becoming an overspill for social problems from outside the area. Children running amok, parents not seeming to give a tinkers about it, and the consequence we saw, throw in the narcissistic nature of social media, throw in a feckless backdrop. The result is what we saw yesterday. Running amok, security guards getting shoved over, the police closing shops rather than nicking these people. Send your comments in. I want to read as many out as I can before the end of the show. gbviews@gbnews.com, of course, is your email address. But before all of that, it's time for your latest news headlines with Sam Francis.
Martin, thanks very much, and good afternoon from the GB newsroom. A look at the headlines just after 4 o'clock. As Martin mentioned, Sir Geoffrey Donaldson has stepped down as leader of the Democratic Unionist Party after he was charged with sex offences of a historical nature. The DUP has also suspended Mr Donaldson from its membership pending the outcome of that legal process, which they say is in accordance with the party's rules. A 57-year-old woman has also been charged with aiding and abetting additional offences in relation to that same police investigation. Sir Geoffrey was elected to Parliament in 1997 and is the longest-serving MP in Northern Ireland. The party have now appointed Gavin Robinson as their interim leader. One of the Conservatives' major party donors has received a knighthood as part of a controversial honours list from Rishi Sunak. Mohamed Mansour gave £5 million to the Tories last year and is a senior treasurer for the party. He was knighted for what's been described as services to business, to charity and politics. Other recipients of honours include MP Philip Davies, who's also a former presenter on this network. And the timing of the list is unusual, coming while Parliament is in recess and on the eve of the Easter bank holiday weekend. Well, we've been speaking to people in Hull to see what they think of the Tories receiving honours.
Think much of anything. One or two of them most probably try, but to me, majority of MPs are like bananas. They're bunched together, they're all yellow, there's not a straight one among them.
But it's self-serving, isn't it? I mean, these people reward themselves for what? I don't quite understand. I don't get it.
It's just a con, really. You know, it's to just they give the Conservatives or the Labour Party money for they want favours in return. So this is the problem.
In other news today, police are now appealing for help in their search for a man suspected of raping 2 women in London. The attacks took place 4 years apart, first in Westminster in 2018, followed by another incident in Shoreditch in 2022. The offences were being investigated as separate crimes, but forensic work helped draw a link between the two. Detectives say it's highly likely the suspect has also committed other attacks. The Metropolitan Force has released an e-fit image for those watching on TV. You can see that image here. Anyone, they say, who thinks they may have information is being urged to contact police or call Crime Stoppers. In the US, the Wall Street Journal has today published an edition of its paper with a blank front page, marking 1 year since their reporter Evan Gershkovich was jailed in Russia. The 32-year-old was detained by the FSB last year on suspicion of espionage, though no evidence has ever been presented for those charges. And despite President Putin's hints of a potential exchange, no deal has been reached so far. Here in the UK, meanwhile, the Archbishop of Canterbury has called on people to pray this Easter weekend for the jailed journalist. Soldiers and officers in the British Army are now allowed to grow beards after a century-old rule has been overturned. The changes come after an official review of the military's appearance policy. Under the new rules, beards and moustaches must be groomed, kept within a specific length and have routine checks. The Defence Secretary Grant Shapps has praised the shift in culture, saying it's an important step for the military keeping up with modern standards. Well, there's been congestion on Britain's roads today as holidaymakers set off for the Easter holidays. Motorists have described horrendous queues stretching up to 20 miles, in some cases adding an extra 45 minutes to journeys. 2.6 million car journeys are expected today, with the M25 and southwest routes particularly busy. The RAC says people en route to seaside destinations in Devon and in Cornwall could be in for some especially bad traffic. And Visit England is expecting a total of 11 million trips over the weekend, injecting £3 billion into British tourism. And the UK's Eurovision Song Contest entry, Ollie Alexander, has rejected calls to withdraw from the song contest, issuing a joint statement signed by 8 other contestants. More than 450 artists and organisations are among a group calling itself Queers for Palestine. They signed an open letter demanding the Years and Years singer pull out of the competition in protest over the inclusion of Israel. In response, Ollie Alexander said that while he supports a full ceasefire in Gaza, he says boycotting the contest would not help to achieve that goal. The collective reply was signed by artists representing 8 participating countries, including Ireland, Norway, Portugal and Finland. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to our website gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sam. Now we start with the news that Sir Geoffrey Donaldson has quit as leader of the Democratic Unionist Party after he was charged with historical sex offences. And Gavin Robinson has been appointed the interim party leader. I'm joined now by our Northern Ireland reporter, Dougie Beattie in Belfast. Dougie, a dramatic story. What's the latest?
Well, this has been a political earthquake in Northern Ireland. Sir Geoffrey Donaldson is the leader of Unionism, the largest unionist party in Northern Ireland, and absolutely nobody's seen this coming. In fact, at 10 o'clock yesterday morning, I was aware that those arrests had taken place, and when I tried to stand that up in amongst senior DUP members, most were absolutely surprised by it. And one of them actually said to me, look, he was due to do a breakfast event and he didn't attend. And then the penny started to drop. And last night, my phone was ringing off the hook by people wanting to know what I knew from inside that party. An emergency meeting of the party officers was called this morning at about 10:30 outside Belfast, not in the DUP headquarters here behind us. And of course that statement then arrived at about midday saying that Sir Geoffrey had been put out of the party as their rules apply, and that he was suspended from the party, and that Gavin Robinson, another MP, had taken over. Now, Sir Geoffrey is the longest serving politician in Northern Ireland, in Westminster. It is the DUP is the 5th largest party in Westminster, so he does hold quite a lot of power, and he has that massive experience that comes with him. So that is why it is so politically shocking here, because the parties in Northern Ireland are in an enforced coalition, 4-party coalition, and Sinn Féin's First Minister, Michelle O'Neill, has released a statement basically saying that she wants that to continue for the importance of the people of Northern Ireland, and wishes to continue with that 4-party coalition. That for Northern Ireland is vitally important because, as you know, I've reported on it often, we have been over 2 years without government in Northern Ireland because of the protocol and then the framework document. And about a month and a half ago, Sir Geoffrey managed to persuade his party to come back into power. And what's really at the heart of this is the DUP, about 27 months ago, was split between the Paisleyites, which was very much the right-hand Conservative side of the DUP, and then the moderate ground. And they would be fearful that that split would appear again. And this news today is definitely earth-shattering for the political parties inside Northern Ireland, and we'll have to see what happens when that court case begins at the end of April.
Huge story there from Belfast. Thank you for joining us and giving us a full update. That was Dougie Beattie. Now, Rishi Sunak has been criticised after a man who gave $5 million to the Conservative Party was awarded a knighthood. Well, businessman Mohammed Mansour, who's a senior treasurer at the party, was knighted for business, charity and political service. Well, I'm joined in our studio in Westminster by our political correspondent, Catherine Forster. Catherine, welcome back to the show. Pleasure to have you as ever. Don't honours get given out all the time to people who give loads of money to political parties, and why is this any different?
Well, it certainly seems that way. Of course, we had cash for honours scandal under Labour, didn't we? But Rishi Sunak, you know, it's Good Friday, and yet again, bad headlines. And of course, this man, Mohammed Mansour, £5 million donation that he gave, that at the time was the biggest single donation to the Conservative Party for 20 years. So a very, very big deal. But this comes just 2 or 3 weeks after the almighty row that we had over the £10 million that Frank Hester had given, and then the comments about Diane Abbott emerged, and the Conservatives are keeping that money. Of course they are. They've got a general election to fight. But really, it's just that the bad headlines for Rishi Sunak just go on and on and on, and indeed the bad news for the Prime Minister.
And Annalise Dodds hit out at the Prime Minister earlier on for recommending this honour. Should we have a listen to what she said?
It seems to be an almost automatic pass now under the Conservatives, and particularly the individual, Mr Mansour, who was last January, the biggest ever donor to the Conservatives, £5 million at that stage, the biggest individual donation that had been given, then seeming to have that automatic pass through to receiving an honour under Rishi Sunak. I think, if anything, it demonstrates yet again his weakness, that he's focused on internal party issues all of the time rather than on the needs of our country.
Well, I seem to recall Tony Blair giving a lot of honours away to his mates. But anyway, I digress. Mohammed Mansour wasn't the only person who was honoured.
No, Christopher Nolan, the director of Oppenheimer, and his wife, a number of Conservative MPs, Tracy Crouch, the former sports minister, Mark Spencer, the farming minister, and Philip Davies, of course, who used to present on this channel. He was on a little bit earlier. Let's see what he had to say.
Philip, the one question I have to ask is what have you done to deserve it?
Well, that's not really for me to answer, Dawn, is it? To be perfectly honest, I didn't award this to myself. It was awarded to me, so it's not for me. It's not for me to decide that. That's for other people, and people will have their own opinion about whether any honour is merited or not. And you only have to look at social media, and you'll see that some people think it's the best decision that Rishi Sunak's ever made, and some people think it's an absolute disgrace. And 'twas ever thus, I suppose, but it's not for me to say whether I deserve it or not, or what I've done. It's for, like I say, I did award it to myself.
Do you think you deserve it?
Well, look, I think probably. I mean, I've never been in this position before, but people feel. But I think, certainly from my point of view, I certainly feel that there's lots more deserving people than me to be honoured. But you know, I'm still immensely proud.
A feisty exchange there earlier on. And talking of which, yesterday Chris Hope sat down with Sir Keir Starmer and asked him again about Angela Rayner and the Council House. This is something that just isn't going away in a hurry.
This story's been rumbling on for weeks. It's not going away because we still haven't got to the bottom of it. Now, Angela Rayner has said repeatedly that this was all checked out by the lawyers, by the advisors. There's no capital gains tax to pay. Sir Keir Starmer has accepted that. He's said his team have seen the legal advice. He's satisfied, but the questions won't go away, partly because the Conservative Party are making hay with this, as you would expect, and partly because this is a woman who ultimately could be our next Deputy Prime Minister. Now, the numbers, the amount of money potentially that she might have owed, about £1,500, not a lot. Nadine Zahawi, of course, had to give over about $5 million. But the point is, she is Housing Secretary. She would expect other people to answer these questions. And the basic issue is, if there were no capital gains tax liable, that's either because this house that she sold, she'd improved it so much there was nothing to pay, or that she had declared it as her main residence. even though it sounds like she didn't live in it. Now, she could choose to explain it. It's got to be one or the other. And I think until she does, these questions are going to continue being asked.
Great stuff. Thank you, Catherine Forster. Always excellence. Now, I'm joined by the former Labour Minister, Dennis McShane. Now, Dennis, welcome to the show. Hope you're having a cracking Easter thus far. The Angela Rayner situation isn't going anywhere in a hurry. As we just said, Ms Rayner was meant to be Sir Keir Starmer's trump card, a way to get the working classes on board. Could she become the biggest millstone, however, around his neck?
No, Martin. I mean, good luck to the Conservative Party and the very, very ultra-conservative press and media ranking this up, £17,000 or something, technical profit, compared to Rishi Sunak giving an honour to a guy who gives him £5 million and moves up into becoming a knight. Or this Frank Hester chap with his appalling racist and misogynist and incitation to sort of attack an MP. And the Conservatives are still brushing it away. They haven't even returned the money. So, I mean, good luck, good luck, good luck. Let me tell you something. Most MPs are registered in 2, even 3 places to live. It's the nature of the job. I don't believe Angela Rayner's myself. I don't know. I obviously don't know much about it, but it is quite clear that a lot of lawyers have gone over this. Another Tory MP in Manchester has said, "Rees, open up the investigations again." And the police always do that when they're put under pressure politically. This is a political stunt. I don't really think, it's never been mentioned to me on any doorstep canvassing in the last few weeks. I just don't think this is much of an issue.
Don't you think that seems to be a concurrent theme, though, Dennis? When the Labour Party do something, say, there's nothing to see here, a bit like the beers and the curries in Durham, nothing to see here. But yet when it happens with the Conservatives, it's always heads must roll, heads must roll. Isn't this about double standards?
Well, not on my part, because I've consistently argued when I was in government, I've consistently written, until we get democracy to pay for democracy, there'll always be a stink over this funding. And it doesn't matter if it's Labour or the Conservatives. The Tories are just a little bit naughtier, Martin. I mean, I think you might agree on this, as were the Liberal Democrats when they existed as a party. And that is why I just wish to God we could abolish all of this and simply say no honours, no nothing, no external money. Democracy pays for democracy.
OK, and out on the road yesterday, Sir Keir Starmer in Dudley said something you think you'd never hear from the Labour Party, certainly not his predecessor, Jeremy Corbyn. There's no magic money tree, he said, which of course is absolutely true. The biscuit tin is empty, £2.7 trillion in national debt. Dennis McShane, is this an acknowledgement that there's no money left? And if people expect there to be some sort of quantum shift, some rapid miracle, some regrowth of public services when Labour Party get in, Sir Keir Starmer is planting the seeds, not of the magic money tree, but of reality.
Indeed so. But the guy who did it first was Gordon Brown. You remember him, Martin. You're probably a bit of a young man then. And he said he would apply conservative spending limits for the first 2 years of the Labour government in 1997. And he and Tony Blair never looked back. Now, there were huge angers, revolts. I can remember 70 of my colleagues rebelling on lone parent benefits being held at a standstill, but it was the right decision and the Labour Party looked stronger for it. So I actually do think that surely Rachel Reeves made pretty clear in her big speech a couple of weeks ago and constantly making clear, Labour, it can't be a spendthrift party. We've inherited the Liz Truss disaster. We've inherited the empty barrel of nothing from the Conservative Party. It's a huge repair job the country now faces. And I think they're making up their mind that they're not going to entrust it to Sir Mansour and Sir Philip Davis. Bless Philip, I like him very much, and Rishi Sunak and all the rest of it. They want a change.
Well, Dennis McShane, they've inherited a biscuit tin that's empty thanks to lockdowns that all of the parties voted for, including the Labour Party. Enjoy your Easter, but don't eat an entire egg at once. That's what the NHS said, not me. Now, moving on, it's your final chance to win our massive spring giveaway with gadgets, a shopping spree and £12,345. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. tax-free. That's all up for grabs. Lines close at 5 o'clock today. It's about 40 minutes' time, so get weaving. This is your last chance to win all of that wonga.
It's the final day to see how you could win big.
I'm Charles. I'm on £18,000 cash. Just go for it. It's an absolute must. You must try and go for it. It's fantastic.
There's a massive £12,345 in tax-free cash to spend however you like, along with £500 in shopping vouchers for your favourite store. You'll also get a garden gadget package. You have to hurry, as lines close at 5 p.m. today. For another chance to win the vouchers, the treats, and £12,345 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB03 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. today. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if watching or listening on demand. Good luck.
40 minutes left. Get stuck in. Could make it a very good Friday for you. Now, 300 kids ran amok in a shopping centre in disgraceful scenes yesterday in Milton Keynes. Wow, it's really got you going. Big question is this: where on earth are the parents? I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
Serving police officers, showing that up to 20% of them are thinking about quitting the force and doing so within the next year or two. What on earth is going wrong? Problem, of course, is that those that go will be the experienced ones to be replaced by inexperienced ones. Kevin Hurley, former Detective Chief Superintendent at the Met Police, joins me from his home in Surrey. Kevin, this figure is shocking.
The terms and conditions have really dropped off under Theresa May's, what I would describe as an attack on the police service, where their pay has really dropped off, spending power down about 22% on what it once was. Worse still, the golden handcuffs, which were once the excellent police pension, have been taken away, and the pension is now much reduced. The other thing that's killing them is the constant media and activist battering for police officers. Off the back of that one psychopath and the other, if you like, Tinder rapist, everybody now thinks the police are kind of all like that. What that means for the individual patrol officers, they're being given stick everywhere. For example, you know, their bosses left, right and centre are rolling over, oh yes, we're institutionally racist. What that means for a 25-year-old constable working in Balham High Street is everyone screaming at him, you're a racist pig. They get surrounded on the streets when they try and do a stop and search or an arrest. Add to that the fact that the criminal justice system is collapsing. They're tipping out the prisons with early releases. So, because of course there's no prison space, cases are taking years to get to court. They're getting derisory sentences because there's no room in the prisons. All of that's really demoralising for the police.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 4:25. I'm Martin Daubney and this is GB News. Now, later in the show, with most of the country looking forward to getting stuck into some Easter eggs, I'm going to be joined by an award-winning chocolatier. Looking forward to that. Now, more than 2.5 million car journeys are expected to be made today. And guess what? It's Britain. The good old British weather is making life even more difficult for travellers, with Storm Nelson hitting parts of the country. Well, our Westminster reporter Jack Carson is above the M6 motorway near Walsall, living the dream there. Jack, what's the latest?
Well, we're just surviving a bit of a rain shower here above the M6, Martin, but here particularly, traffic seems to be moving a lot smoother than it was earlier. There was a lot of congestion, particularly around Junction 10 this morning, when a lot of people, of course, would have been setting off for their journeys. And it's actually been quite a similar picture across the country. You can probably see some pictures now, if you are listening on radio, to the M1, which was definitely had some congestion earlier, a lot of slow-moving traffic. That was very much the case earlier this morning and around lunchtime. It's going to continue to be the case for much of this afternoon as well, before we get to the evening, when particularly the highways will become a lot quieter. That is the advice really around the country. If you are travelling, to travel within the evening times, outside of those peak times, to try and miss that congestion. But of course, there have been accidents across the country as well, particularly around the M4 and Bristol. That area had some congestion and some serious slow-moving traffic there, and on the west side of the M25 as well, around the M1 in Hertfordshire, that also had some slow-moving traffic. So that's very much been the case on the roads today. And that advice, for those people that are travelling and setting off, to check things like your tyre pressure, to give yourself the least chance of an accident and least chance of having a breakdown, which of course we know how quickly things can change if something does happen on the motorways as well. There have been more cars on the road because of also disruption within the railway lines as well, particularly the West Coast main line between Milton Keynes and London Euston. That's closed for the next, today and for the next 3 days. So that's forced a few more people on the road. So looking a bit quieter now, but across the country, do expect some congestion today, Martin.
Thanks, Jack Carlson, and happy driving out there on the roads. Now, if you want to sum up the sorry state of this country, then a video of hundreds of kids running amok in a shopping centre surely sums it up. The children clashed with security staff in Milton Keynes yesterday. Police issued a dispersal order after the incident, which involved around 300 youngsters. Well, I'm joined now by Norman Brennan, who's a former London police officer and, of course, is the director of the Law and Order Foundation. Welcome to the show, Norman. Always a pleasure. Hope you're having a very happy Easter. The country is broken, and this video yesterday sums it up.
Absolutely. There's not a day that goes by, Martin, that I don't see somewhere on social media or in the media, or I'm told, of a group of feral youths running amok in our streets, in supermarkets, on buses, on trains. Some of them are armed. It's not normally at this high a number, but I'm afraid that, and it's a shameful thing to say, we have got a lost generation. As well as these 300, I mean, there is school uniforms, some of them. We have 4,000 gangs in Britain, Martin, 4,200 in London. They number upwards of a couple of dozen. We have county lines. The majority of these young boys and youths are armed, out of control, and it appears that there's no parameters. They can do and behave and be how they want and wish, and nobody can get in their way. And if they do, there will be severe consequences. When did we allow our children to be so indisciplined and as so far out of control as they are today? And you're absolutely right. The finger needs to be pointed at their parents.
What about policing, Norman? Back in your day, no doubt there'd have been short shrift with these yobbos. You'd have been in there and you'd have been nicking them. But yesterday, they seemed to stand by and watch.
Again, I'm ashamed to say, I've been in policing and law and order for 45 years. It wasn't perfect in my day. I've got to tell you, we didn't take any of this nonsense. We truly didn't. We were there in our numbers. The police have lost the streets. There aren't enough of them. They go from one pole to the next. They're pulled from pillar to post, one demonstration to the next. They can't even police their own areas. And when they do, it's fire brigade policing, one emergency to the next, and they don't get time to investigate crime. The victims are sick and tired because they feel failed. The public feel let down because they don't feel safe. What does it say about our criminal justice system when the streets are lost, The police are broken. The criminal justice system, magistrates and judges and juvenile courts are more social workers than arbiters of right and wrong and punishment and deterrent. And we have parents failing to play their part. We have a lost generation where too many children see no consequences for their appalling bad behaviour.
Yeah, Norman Brennan, once again echoing what a lot of people are saying out there, speaking pure common sense. Norman, of course, a former London police officer and the current director of the Law and Order Foundation. Thanks for joining us on the show. Now, Westminster City Hall are under fire as they scrambled for a seemingly last-minute window display, and Ramadan lights are staying up over Easter weekend in London. This is the Martin Daubney Show, but first, it's your latest news headlines with Sam Francis.
Martin, thank you very much and good afternoon to you. The headlines just after 4:30. Sir Geoffrey Donaldson has stepped down as the leader of the Democratic Unionist Party after he was charged with historical sex offences. He's also been suspended from the party pending the outcome of the legal process. A 57-year-old woman has also been charged with aiding and abetting additional offences in relation to that same police investigation. Sir Geoffrey was elected to Parliament in 1997 and is the longest-serving MP in Northern Ireland. The party have now appointed Gavin Robinson as the interim leader. Major donors would not get an automatic pass to receiving honours, according to the party's chairwoman. Annalise Dodds was speaking after one of the Conservative Party's major donors was recommended for a knighthood by Rishi Sunak. Mohamed Mansour gave £5 million to the Tories last year. He was knighted for what's described as services to business, to charity and politics. A man has been charged with 2 counts of attempted murder after a stabbing at Kennington Underground Station in London. Nicholas Orlando Green, who's 35, has been remanded in custody and will appear at Highbury Corner Magistrates Court tomorrow. He's also charged with possession of a bladed article and 1 count of sexual assault after a member of the public reported being groped as the suspect left the station. And there's congestion on Britain's roads today as holidaymakers set off for the Easter break. Motorists have described horrendous queues stretching up to 20 miles, in some cases adding an extra 45 minutes to journey times. 2.6 million car journeys are expected today, with the M25 and the southwest particularly busy. The RAC says people en route to seaside destinations in Devon and in Cornwall could be in for some especially bad traffic. Visit England is expecting a total of 11 million trips over the weekend, injecting £3 billion into British tourism. Those are the headlines. More coming up at 5 o'clock. In the meantime, you can sign up to GB News Alerts. Just scan the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sam. Now, it's exactly 1 year since Humza Yousaf became Scotland's First Minister. And after the turbulent last 12 months, I doubt today is a very happy anniversary for him. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Gary King in Kent, the westbound M2. There's a lane closed due to a breakdown between junction 6 at Faversham and junction 5 at Sittingbourne. In Surrey, the clockwise M25 looking busy following an accident now on the hard shoulder between junction 8 at Reigate and 9 at Leatherhead. In Berkshire, the westbound M4, long delays around junction 13 at Cheveley. That's due to roadworks. In Buckinghamshire, northbound M40 looking slow after an earlier accident between junction 3 at Loudwater and junction 4 at High Wycombe. And in Warwickshire on the southbound M40 there are delays after an earlier vehicle fire between junction 12 at Gaydon and 11 at Banbury. And in Cheshire, the southbound M6, there's a lane closed and delays due to a vehicle having a tyre change just after junction 20 at the M56. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
It's a remarkable story, isn't it?
Amazing.
Extraordinary. And also, she was unflappable, apparently, the Princess Royal.
She's
just
brilliant.
refused to get out of the car and said, I'm not going anywhere. Extraordinary. Well, Jim Beaton was awarded the George Cross for protecting the Princess, and delighted to say joins us now, along with the former head of Royalty Protection, Di Davis. Jim, you won't remember, but I met you some time ago at the Imperial War Museum when Princess Anne was opening an exhibition to do with the George Cross, and you were there reunited with her. And you told me then what great admiration you had for the Princess, cool under fire, but you didn't do so badly yourself.
It was probably my job. And also, I had a wee bit of police training, not very much, but a little bit, whereas Princess Anne had nothing. And yet, the way she displayed it, you would have thought she'd been highly trained to deal with any type of that situation.
Even though you'd had some training, you took 3 bullets for the Princess. You effectively stood between her and a deranged gunman.
Well, I was supposed to be a protection officer, really, so I just tried to fuddle about. You must remember that back in 1974, there was no communication, and we were extremely lucky that Michael Hills, who was outside Clarence House and nearby, had got one of the fast police radios, or radios on his shoulder, so he was able to send a message out. Otherwise, we would have just been relying on the good old public to phone in and say there was something happening.
Yeah.
So times have changed drastically.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 4:38. I'm Martin Daubney and this is GB News. Now, it's exactly 1 year since Humza Yousaf became Scotland's First Minister, and what a year it's been. His predecessor, Nicola Sturgeon, has been arrested, and he's also seen the SNP slump in the polls. Well, GB News' Scotland reporter Tony Maguire has been looking back at an eventful 12 months.
It is hard for me to find the words to describe just how honoured I am.
It's been a year since Humza Yousaf was sworn in as Scottish First Minister after a fraught leadership race left the SNP divided. From the get-go, his premiership was obscured in the shadow of an investigation into the SNP's finances, leading to the arrest of former First Minister Nicola Sturgeon, who was later released without charge.
I am absolutely certain that I have done nothing wrong, and that is a position that I will continue to maintain.
As an emboldened Scottish Labour prepares for a general election, Anas Sarwar says Humza Yousaf's incompetence is now showing through, and his party is catching on.
He's a weak leader, leading a divided party, an incompetent government, and one that's run out of road. Every area of public policy, every demographic, every part of our country, every corner and every community can point to their own reason on why this SNP government has utterly failed them.
A year into his tenure, Humza Yousaf has seen the SNP slump in the polls, and he's faced defections in both parliaments. MP for East Kilbride, Lisa Cameron, crossed the floor to the Tories in Westminster, while his leadership racemate Ash Regan defected to Alex Salmond's Alba party, becoming their first Holyrood MSP.
The independent strategy that the SNP are putting forward, I don't think it's a credible independent strategy.
And when it comes to the voters putting their money where their mouth is, Scottish Labour annihilated the SNP at the Rutherglen and Hamilton West by-election, securing 58.6% of the vote. Add to that an abandonment of the Section 35 legal challenge and courts blocking the last realistic path to independence, while 2023 has left little room for browbeaten nationalists to chalk up a win. Of course, Humza Yousaf has other ideas and has offered up one election prospect that his supporters can't ignore.
We have the opportunity to ensure that Scotland
is Tory-free.
So, how do Scottish voters think Humza Yousaf is handling the top job?
It's all about the youth vote, I think, and I think he's a person who will be good to reach out to the young voters.
Yeah, I think it's more of the same and pretty much predictable.
We haven't had a good track record in the past.
His track record?
His track record, and just most of the government.
A council tax freeze and a ScotRail trial doing away with peak rail fares has gone some way to keeping the public on side. But as this recent polling from YouGov shows, his support is much lower than Keir Starmer, Rishi Sunak, and even his predecessor, Nicola Sturgeon. There's no denying the winds of change are blowing a gale in this tumultuous year of Scottish politics. But as ever, nothing provides greater clarity than the voice of the people on polling day. Tony Maguire, GB News.
Well, to get more on this, I'm now joined by Michael Simmons, who's the data editor at The Spectator. Welcome to the show, Michael. Hope you're having a cracking Easter. So, Humza Yousaf's polling, astonishingly, is less popular than Nicola Sturgeon. She's currently on bail, and only one living person has donated to the SNP in 2023. Michael, has there been any good bits?
Well, I think on the whole, no. I mean, things have gone pretty badly for Humza Yousaf. As you say, he's got this terrible personal polling. The SNP are going down in the polls, and, you know, scandals don't seem to be going away. Where there might be some comfort for Humza Yousaf is Labour sort of closing in on the SNP. Looks like it might be slowing down, and maybe that this kind of floor of the SNP vote propped up by the, you know, forever referendum people might be sort of high enough to keep the SNP at a kind of a winning base. So he might take that as some good news, but as his, you know, personal leadership, has that got anything to do with that? Probably not.
And Michael, is the dream of independence now just a retreating prospect? If the SNP can't poll well, then surely with it, that single issue withers away.
Yeah, I think certainly, you know, in the medium term, it's hard to see how independence would come about. It's kind of odd, actually, because independence still polls sort of fairly highly. There's some occasional polls where it's on more than 50%, although the average is still towards no. But I think without any path to a referendum, a legal referendum, there's just no way to see it happening. And if the SNP are going to lose seats, they're not going to be able to bring that about. But actually, what's more than that is when I speak to, you know, independent supporters up in Scotland, there isn't really this feeling that there was under Nicola Sturgeon that it was just around the corner. Nobody thinks it's about to happen, even the diehard supporters. And without that kind of momentum, you could see the issue sort of ebbing away.
As you'd expect, the Scottish Labour leader Anas Sawar has been putting the boot in, saying he's failing on the basics of government, pointing to NHS waiting lists, falling educational standards, low economic growth, soaring drug addiction. Is another issue, do you think, Michael, this seeming obsession that Gaza is more important than Glasgow?
Yeah, well, I think this is something that certainly makes Humza Yousaf unpopular with people that he's already unpopular with. You know, there's been these issues with Scottish Government funds being redirected towards parts of the UN that help Gaza. But equally, I think people are cutting him some slack on this issue because he has this family connection where his mother-in-law's family were stuck in Gaza. So I think, in a way, you know, people are slightly sympathetic to that. However, you have to take that against this, you know, terrible domestic record where a lot of Scots would say they would like, and not just Humza Yousaf, other ministers within the Scottish Government to put more effort into, you know, improving things at home.
OK, thank you for joining us. Michael Simmons, data editor at The Spectator, on perhaps a year to forget for Humza Yousaf. Now, Ramadan lights are staying up over Easter weekend in London with little to no Easter displays. Is Britain still a Christian country? This is the Martin Daubney Show on GB News. I'm Martin Daubney, Britain's News Channel.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. Well, this Easter weekend, for many of us, we will see some sunshine, but there will still be some rain around. It's all courtesy of this area of low pressure. It's going to hang around for the long weekend, but with winds coming in from the south, it should feel a little bit less cold than it has been of late. So for the rest of Good Friday, showers becoming increasingly restricted to more western and northern parts of the country. Central and eastern parts turning dry overnight. Could just see a few misty patches come dawn, and also a touch of ground frost with temperatures falling down to about 3 to 4 degrees. But where we do see the chilly conditions first thing Saturday morning, we will see some sunshine. Just keeping an eye on this area of rain. It could just fringe the far east of East Anglia for a time, but I think for most of us, really, it's going to be a day of sunny spells and a few showers. Showers a little bit fewer and further between compared to today, with the main focus across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. But in the sunshine, feeling pleasant enough, highs reaching around 14 or 15 degrees. Then looking ahead to Easter Day, again another day of sunny spells and showers. Showers probably again restricted to Northern Ireland, with fewer and further showers the further east you go. In the sunshine, feeling pleasantly warm, highs reaching around 16 degrees. And then looking ahead to Easter Monday, it looks like another band of rain moving up from the south.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Welcome back. It's 4:49. I'm Martin Daubney and this is GB News. Now, I've been asking you throughout the show for your emails, and there's one topic that's really got you going. In fact, I don't think a single topic has rankled you quite as much as this. Of course, it's that video of the shopping centre in Milton Keynes. You can see on your screens there. This was from yesterday afternoon. 300 children. They organised via social media. They turned up mob-handed. They shoved things over. They had shops closed down. They harassed security guards, you can see on the screen there, shoving and pushing them, filming the whole thing, finding it to be top larks. The police seemingly powerless. Nothing happened. Asking huge questions. Does this video signify what's happening to our country, a broken Britain? Hundreds have emailed in. Let's go through a few of them now. Pete says this. This is simply lawless Britain. This is essentially broken window theory in reverse, guys. What I mean by that is if you don't arrest shoplifters, then you get an increase in shoplifting that eventually leads to mobs running into stores and taking whatever they want. If the police don't police, if they are too scared to stop and search, then this is what you get. Yvonne adds this. It's very simple to me, Martin. National service is a solution to these want-away kids. They lack discipline. They won't get it at home. The police are afraid to do it, so let's put them in the army. Then they'll soon learn. Jack, totally backing that point up here. Jack says this. Martin, I'm an ex-gunner. I served 27 years in the military. To me, it's a no-brainer. 3 months in a military boot camp run by ex-military. We would soon sort these delicate little angels out. Let me know if you're up for it, Martin. I'd volunteer to be one of those boot campers. There we go. Jack is up for it. Emma said this, all the same kinds of kids, isn't it? Take a look at their faces. Not the Milton Keynes kids of the 1980s, where I grew up, are they? OK, moving on. Westminster City Hall was seen to have changed their window display from Ramadan to Easter in a matter of hours after Tory councillor Paul Swallow pointed out Islamic Holy Month had been honoured and that there was no corresponding Easter display. And this comes after Ramadan lights were put on display across central London, which prompted concern over support for other major faiths during important Christian festivals. Well, I'm joined now by Tim Dieppe, who's the head of public policy at Christian Concern. Welcome to the show, Tim. I hope you're having a peaceful and blessed Easter. How disconcerting is it to Christians when they see Ramadan lights during this important Christian period? Do you see it as an invasion? Is it a step too far?
I think it is kind of symbolic, isn't it? Very powerfully symbolic that here we are in Easter, the most important Christian festival, when we celebrate the resurrection of Jesus, which is the foundation of our faith, which has formed the foundation of Western civilization and the foundation of our culture and laws and values for centuries. And here we are, and then, like you say, Oxford Street is lit up for Ramadan over Easter time, and then Westminster City Council seemed to forget about Easter. They had a display ready for Ramadan and nothing for Easter. And it's very interesting because it seems like people are more concerned to celebrate Ramadan or mark Ramadan than they are Easter. And that's kind of a very interesting cultural moment to see that Islam seems to be gaining in terms of influence and people wanting to respect it, people wanting to give it credit and so on, and Christianity in the decline and people wanting to disrespect it and forgetting about it extraordinarily. And sort of having to, last minute, get a display there in Westminster City Hall. So I think it is concerning. I think it is something that sort of marks how Islam is growing in our society and gaining influence, and in many different ways across society. And this is one of those kind of moments where we see that.
OK, thank you very much. We're going to have to leave it there. We're simply running out of time. Tim Dieppe, who's the head of public policy at Christian Concern. Now, a spokesman for Westminster Council has sent us this comment. The council supports festivals from different faith communities throughout the year, and the Ramadan lights form part of that activity. And we hoped this would inspire Muslims and people of other faiths to come up with their own ideas to celebrate important events. It's spreading awareness in such a nice way through art and light installation. So it's an interesting point, that is. It's an interesting point, And, Tim Dieppe there said this is an oversight. It's being forgetful. Is it? Is it just an oversight, or is it something more? Do you think this is a deliberate erosion of the Christian values of this nation? Are we actually still a Christian nation? Has the church been a part of that downfall? They seem to care more about climate change and refugees welcome and issues that don't even impact most of Christian followers. They seem more obsessed with slavery and reparations and guilt trips. Is this why it's falling away? Do these Ramadan lights bother you? Or is this all a bit of a storm in a teacup? Let me know your thoughts, GBNews at gbnews.com. And, of course, after this, we'll have much more on that video in Milton Keynes. So many emails coming through. It's unbelievable. An astonishing response from you people out there, including many, many who live in Milton Keynes who say they simply don't recognise their own town anymore. Well, that's all from me this hour, but stay with me and I'll be joined by a travel expert shortly, getting updates on the travel chaos across Britain as millions hit the road for the bank holiday weekend. Some are calling it Carmageddon. Let's hope it's not quite as bad as that. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel. Now's your weather with Craig Snell.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. Well, this Easter weekend, for many of us, we will see some sunshine, but there will still be some rain around. It's all courtesy of this area of low pressure. It's going to hang around for the long weekend, but with winds coming in from the south, it should feel a little bit less cold than it has been of late. So for the rest of Good Friday, showers becoming increasingly restricted to more western and northern parts of the country. Central and eastern parts turning dry overnight. Could just see a few misty patches come dawn, and also a touch of ground frost with temperatures falling down to about 3 to 4 degrees. But where we do see the chilly conditions first thing Saturday morning, we will see some sunshine. Just keeping an eye on this area of rain. It could just fringe the far east of East Anglia for a time, but I think for most of us, really, it's going to be a day of sunny spells and a few showers. Showers a little bit fewer and further between compared to today, with the main focus across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. But in the sunshine, feeling pleasant enough, highs reaching around 14 or 15 degrees. Then looking ahead to Easter Day, again another day of sunny spells and showers. Showers probably again restricted to Northern Ireland, with fewer and further showers the further east you go. In the sunshine, feeling pleasantly warm, highs reaching around 16 degrees. And then looking ahead to Easter Monday, looks like another band of rain moving up from the south.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Gary King in Surrey. The southbound M3, there's a lane close on the exit slip road at junction 3 at Lightwater following a breakdown. In Berkshire, the westbound M4, long delays around junction 13 at Cheveley. It's not helped by roadworks. In Worcestershire, the southbound M5 has a lane closed due to a breakdown between junction 5 at Droitwich and junction 6 at Worcester. In Staffordshire, the northbound M6, long delays building at the moment. There's a lane closed after an accident between Keel Services and junction 16 at Stoke-on-Trent. Delays are going back towards junction 15, and in Renfrewshire the westbound M8 has the lane closed and delays due to emergency barrier repairs, and that's westbound from junction 29 at St James towards junction 30 at Erskine Bridge. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
It's the final week to see how you could win big. You could win an amazing £12,345 in tax-free cash that you could spend however you like. Plus, there's a further £500 of shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite store. We'll also give you a gadget package to use in your garden this spring. That includes a games console, a pizza oven and a portable smart speaker, so you can listen to GB News on the go. You have to hurry, as lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. For another chance to win the vouchers, the treats and £12,345 in tax-free cash, text GB-WIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB03 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if watching or listening on demand. Good luck.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
A very good afternoon to you and a happy Good Friday. It's 5 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster all across the UK. Sir Geoffrey Donaldson has quit as leader of the Democratic Unionist Party after being charged with historical sex offences. Sir Keir Starmer warns cash-strapped councils that there's no magic money tree. And there's even more bad news for Rishi Sunak today. And in shocking scenes that's really got you going, 300 kids ran amok in a shopping centre in Milton Keynes. What on earth is going on in our country? I'll be asking a school teacher soon. Is it their fault? And the great Easter getaway has well and truly started. And for some drivers, it's very slow going. It's Carmageddon out there. And that's all coming in your next hour. Welcome to the show. Always an absolute pleasure to have your company, especially on this Good Friday. I hope you're having a peaceful, restful time and not overdoing it on the chocolate. Don't forget, the NHS said don't eat an all egg at once. Well, we get through a couple later on in this hour. I want to hear from you. This show is just as much yours as it is mine. There's one topic today really rankled you, and it's this video in Milton Keynes. 300 kids, a social media meetup, shoving security guards, ransacking shops, powerless police looking on. So many questions are being asked. Who's culpable? Where are the parents? Where is the respect? Where are the consequences? Are the schools to blame? Are they not disciplining children enough? I'll speak to Bobby Siegel later in this hour. He knows a thing or two about discipline in classrooms. Let me know your thoughts the usual way. gbviews@gbnews.com. But first, let's get stuck into your latest news headlines with Sam Francis.
Martin, thank you, and very good afternoon to you. It's just gone 5 o'clock, and leading the news this hour, Sir Geoffrey Donaldson has stepped down as the leader of the Democratic Unionist Party after he was charged with sex offences of a historical nature. The DUP has also suspended Mr Donaldson from its membership pending the outcome of the legal process, which they say is in accordance with party rules. A 57-year-old woman has also been charged with aiding and abetting additional offences in relation to that same police investigation. Sir Geoffrey was elected to Parliament in 1997 and is the longest-serving MP in Northern Ireland. They've now appointed Gavin Robinson as the interim leader. One of the Conservative Party's major donors has received a knighthood as part of a controversial honours list from Rishi Sunak. Mohamed Mansour gave £5 million to the Tories last year and is a senior treasurer for the party. He was knighted for what's described as services to business, to charity and to politics. Other recipients include the MP Philip Davies, who is also a former presenter on this network. The timing of the list is unusual, though, coming while Parliament is in recess and on the eve of the Easter bank holiday weekend. Police are appealing for help in their search for a man who's suspected of raping 2 women in London. The attacks took place 4 years apart, first in Westminster in 2018, followed by another incident in Shoreditch in 2022. Those offences were being investigated as separate crimes, but forensic work has helped draw a link between the two. Detectives say it's highly likely the suspect has also committed other attacks. The Metropolitan Force has released this e-fit if you're watching on television, and they're asking anyone who thinks they may have information to contact police or call Crime Stoppers. And in other news, police have issued an urgent appeal to help them locate a disabled boy's specially modified van that has been stolen from a family in East London. The Carriazo family's 13-year-old son, Elijah, has a rare muscular condition and survives with the help of medical equipment. If you're watching on TV, you can see these CCTV pictures of the van as it was being stolen in Hackney in the capital. It took the family 9 months to restore that van, and it's used to transport specialist medical equipment. Elijah's mother, Onessa, told GB News earlier that she's hoping the van is returned before Elijah's birthday, which she said could be their last holiday together.
It's not the van that you took, but it's our freedom as a family, his freedom as to whatever life he's got. He's got a limited time here, and we just hope that you pull something in your heart to look at this as not a material thing, but look at this as what you could give to Elijah into whatever life, whatever we could squeeze in to whatever limited time we've got.
And to the US now, where the Wall Street Journal has published an edition of its paper with a blank front page, marking 1 year since their reporter, Evan Gershkovich, was jailed in Russia. The 32-year-old was detained last year on charges of spying, though no evidence has ever been presented for those charges. And despite President Putin's hints of a potential exchange, no deal has so far been reached. Here in the UK, meanwhile, the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, has called on people to pray this Easter weekend for the jailed journalist. Well, today we've learned that soldiers and officers in the British Army are now allowed to grow beards after a century-old rule was overturned. The changes come after an official review of the military's appearance policy. Under the new rules, beards and moustaches must be groomed, kept within a specific length, and have routine checks. The Defence Secretary, Grant Shapps, has praised the shift in culture, saying it's important that the military keeps up with modern standards. There's been congestion on Britain's roads today as holidaymakers set off for the Easter break. Motorists have described horrendous queues stretching up to 20 miles in some places. 2.6 million car journeys were expected today, with the M25 and southwest routes particularly busy. The RAC says that people en route to seaside destinations in Devon and Cornwall could be in for some especially bad traffic. And Visit England, the tourism board, expects a total of 11 million trips over the weekend, bringing in some £3 billion to British tourism. And finally, Ollie Alexander has rejected calls to withdraw from the Eurovision Song Contest this year, issuing a joint statement signed by 8 other contestants. More than 450 artists and organisations are among a group calling itself Queers for Palestine, and they've signed an open letter demanding that the Years and Years singer pull out of the competition in protest over the inclusion of Israel. Well, in response, Ollie Alexander said that while he does support a full ceasefire in Gaza, boycotting the contest would, he says, not help to achieve that goal. The collective reply was signed by artists representing 8 participating countries, including Ireland, Norway, Portugal and Finland. Those are the headlines. More coming up in the next half hour. In the meantime, do sign up to GB News Alerts. Just scan the code there on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now, though, it's back to Martin.
Now we start with the news that Sir Geoffrey Donaldson has quit as leader of the Democratic Unionist Party after he was charged with historical sex offences, and Gavin Robinson has been appointed interim party leader. And I'm joined now by our Northern Ireland reporter Dougie Beattie, who's live in Belfast. Dougie, an astonishing story. What's the latest?
Well, it is astonishing, and it has been a real political shock in Northern Ireland this morning, especially inside the DUP itself. I mean, this story started, I got word of it yesterday, early morning yesterday, that this was happening. I was trying to contact members of the DUP and was basically told it was nonsense, that wouldn't happen. Then Sir Geoffrey didn't appear at a breakfast meeting, and by 10 o'clock last night my phone was red hot from senior members inside the DUP wanting to know what I knew. But this morning at about 10:30 the party executive met, the party officers met this morning outside Belfast, and there it became very apparent that what we were hearing was true. Now, Sir Geoffrey Donaldson has been at the head of unionism in Northern Ireland for quite some time. In fact, he is the longest serving politician in Northern Ireland, and he brings with him an amazing amount of experience. So you can imagine the shock that this has been. I mean, people like Julian Smith were tweeting today saying about how much he had brought to the table, about putting Stormont back together again after that 2-year break. The Ulster Unionist Party saying that the DUP's leadership was really a matter for the DUP, while acknowledging the hurt that is going to happen to the families that are involved in this. And of course, Sinn Féin's Michelle O'Neill, the First Minister of Northern Ireland, saying that basically that they had to keep continuing with the four-party coalition that runs Northern Ireland. So you can see from this point how much disruption will be put in place inside Northern Ireland by this shocking news this morning of these historical charges. Now, that Sir Geoffrey put the party back together here after about 27 months ago. It basically had a civil war within itself between the right wing of the party and that middle ground. And really and truly, he has managed to do that and steer the ship, bringing them back in the last sort of month and a half. But it must be said now that there are others inside Northern Ireland that are maybe perhaps looking at this as an opportunity to realign unionism and take a different route with it and give it a different sense of belonging, because the DUP always had that Conservative side of things. So this morning that news of the arrest was made public, and of course the bail conditions and stuff around that remain basically private. But today and this evening there will be many talks going on, particularly behind us here. This is actually Gavin Robinson's constituency office as well as DUP headquarters, and Gavin is a very, very popular member of the DUP, but he also sits in an area that he is under electoral pressure from the Alliance Party. 1,000 votes could swing it the other way, and if we have a general election in the next year, if the DUP do not clean this up very, very quickly, they could be looking at losing quite a few seats.
OK, thanks for that update from Belfast. That's Doogie Beattie, our Northern Ireland reporter. Now, we talked a lot yesterday about Sir Keir Starmer and his comments about banning protests outside schools. Of course, we got to talk about the Batley Grammar School, of which I'm very proud. But there was one of the comments from Sir Keir that I want to focus on now, and it's this, because with the country drowning in around £2.7 trillion of national debt, the Labour leader warned those in Dudley that there's no magic money tree. Well, I'm joined now in our studio by our political correspondent, Catherine Forster. Catherine, Sir Keir on the election trail, a soft election trail in Dudley, but if councillors there are expecting a Maundy Thursday money handout, severely disappointed. Is this reality bites time? Now, we are massively in debt, and whatever people think about the party, the country being transformed by a Labour government, the biscuit tin is simply empty.
Yes, I think it is reality biting. And as Labour said to the Conservatives back in 2010, sorry, there's no money left. And we're in pretty much a similar situation now with a potential incoming Labour government. So although voters seem to be absolutely fed up to the back teeth after the Conservatives ruling and taxes at a 70-year high, public services not in a good place, it's clear that no matter who is in charge after the next election, there isn't a lot of money. We've got a massive national debt, as you say, and turning the economy round, creating the factors for growth, etc., takes time. So anybody who thinks that voting in Labour, Sir Keir Starmer, that suddenly they'll be able to get a doctor's appointment, that taxes will fall, that we'll get growth, is in for a big disappointment. It's going to be very, very difficult for whatever colour of party is in power after the next election.
And talking of which, there could be a third colour in this race, the Reform Party. Some staggering polling out today. A major headache for Rishi Sunak is growing, not only the nationwide polling of 14%, but when you dive into the detail, Catherine, there's a real problem for Rishi Sunak amongst the working class voters.
Yeah, dreadful news for Rishi Sunak. It feels like all the news for Rishi Sunak is bad these days. So working class voters are now more likely to vote for Reform than the Conservatives. Northern voters more likely to vote for Reform, men more likely to vote for Reform. And of the people who voted Conservative in 2019, only about half of them are planning to do so again. And a huge third of them are planning to go straight to Reform. Only about 12% thinking of going across to Labour. But of course, Reform are probably not going to get many or maybe any seats, but they're likely to stop the Tories getting a whole load of seats that they might otherwise have won. And this really could be an existential crisis for the Conservative Party.
Midlands, working class, white men. It's almost like Lee Anderson personified. I wonder how much of Lee crossing the floor to reform has given them this boost. And what about the big one? There's talk in the press today of attempts to neutralise Nigel. Because if that man were to come back, when I say neutralise, offer him a peerage, offer him an ambassador's job, they're scrambling around with a Nigel-shaped problem, and they seem like headless chickens.
They're very worried, and there's a leaked recording of Danny Kruger from the New Conservatives saying, you know, how devastating reform could be for them, and saying that he was sympathetic to their sort of diagnosis of the problem, that the Conservatives weren't conservative enough, though he did say, you know, that they were reform out to destroy the Conservatives. And, of course, they're doing very well as it is. If Nigel Farage comes from his sort of semi-hands-off role as chair, comes back and leads the party, then inevitably they're going to go higher in the polls. So, yes, some suggestions that they could potentially buy him off effectively, give him UK ambassador, to the United States, especially given he's clearly got an incredibly good relationship with Donald Trump, who may well be president come November. So, the Conservatives must think they just cannot seem to catch a break at the moment. And it just feels like things are going from bad to worse to even worse.
Something else, I know you were very involved in this story. Angela Rayner, of course, here's another story that just won't go away. There's a whiff of badness around it, around the council house past. You just told me a story about when she first spoke about this in the Commons. You got some insight into her mind.
Well, it was a couple of weeks ago, because this story has been rumbling around, as you say, for weeks. It's a bit technical, but basically she says she doesn't. She says she's had all the correct advice. But some estimates that she might owe about £1,500 in capital gains tax. And the first time she had to speak to journalists about this was a couple of weeks ago at a press gallery lunch in Westminster. She was asked repeatedly about this. And what struck me was not so much the words she used, but the words that she didn't. And also she got really quite emotional, because we think of her as being very sort of take no prisoners, straight talking, very feisty, which she is. But she was really quite emotional. She was almost in tears at one point, I would say. And she was saying, look, I was a care worker. My son was born very prematurely. He's registered blind. I have another son, a teenager. My brother was also helping me. He had his own struggles. He'd served in the armed forces. And a real outpouring of very, very personal, quite embarrassing. It felt, to me, I think to other journalists there, quite embarrassing. But her basic message was, back off, give me some privacy. I've done nothing wrong. But the problem is, she can say that till the cows come home, but unless she's going to explain why there was no capital gains tax paid on the house that she owned when she appeared to live largely in another house, I don't think these questions are going to go away. Now, maybe she had the house that she sold, which was her home, as her main residence. There's nothing illegal about that. But she and her husband combined, you can only have one main residence between you. And so these questions have still not been answered. And so I think they will carry on being asked, despite the fact she clearly doesn't like it.
Do you think this is a case of double standards? Because we hear all the time from the Labour Party that heads must roll if any Conservative is seen to have performed any kind of indiscretion. We saw it with parties during COVID, any financial irregularities around donors, and yet now Sir Keir Starmer, I was astonished yesterday, he said, I don't need to see the detail of what happened to Angela Rayner. This is the guy who used to be in charge of the CPS. They seem to believe, I think, that they can just brush it away and it will go away. Will it go away, or will this keep rumbling on?
I don't think it will go away, and that's partly because the Conservative Party obviously sees leverage in this. And I think worth saying too, Zahari had to hand back £5 million last year. We're probably talking about £1,500 here, but of course it does matter because she's Housing Secretary. She would expect other people to be held to account, and she might well be Deputy Prime Minister in just a few months from now. So sure, the amounts are small, but I think the principle is important. And yes, Sir Keir Starmer, quite canny, I think, in the way he chose to phrase that, in that he said, my team have seen the advice, I don't need to. So being supportive, but slightly hands-off, so that if further information should emerge, he'd be able to say, well, I wasn't aware.
Great, so thank you for joining me today. Catherine Force, have a cracking Easter. Now, you don't want to miss our big interview with the former Immigration Minister, Robert Jenrick, on Patrick Christie's tonight. And he's criticised Rishi Sunak, claiming the Prime Minister wasn't interested in talking about legal migration while he was in the Cabinet.
Well, I didn't feel that the Prime Minister understood the importance of legal migration to the British public. It was an issue that I have cared about for a long time. I shared that conviction with Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary at the time. She and I met the Prime Minister approximately every fortnight to talk about Home Office issues like stopping the boats, like security and policing. Never once did we have a conversation about legal migration because the Prime Minister didn't want to talk about it.
And that's on Patrick Christie's tonight, 9 till 11. Now, 300 kids ran amok in a shopping centre in disgraceful scenes yesterday in Milton Keynes. Where are the parents and are schools to blame? I'll be discussing that soon. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
So many of you have been getting in touch over the WASPI issue. And actually, I just want to bring forward a view from Tony, who has written in to say something that we haven't included in this conversation so far. Tony says it was well publicised. Stop all the crying, his words. He says the Pensions Act 1995 provided for this change. It was marginally sped up in 2010, but the fundamental issue, the WASPI issue, didn't come about in 2010 or 2011. It came about in 1995.
Yeah, people know that the legislation was earlier, but the problem was a lot of women weren't told.
Beverly, who's a WASPI woman, has written in saying, were the WASPI women living under a stone? I am one of the women who was affected by this change. My peers and I were fully aware of the changes. It was widely discussed on TV, radio and in the newspapers as soon as the decision was made. We weren't happy at the time, but we recognised that it was fair. It's wrong to spend billions in this way. I'd rather the post office people who suffered so much were reimbursed.
Well, I think for the social contract to work and for our society to be cohesive and harmonious, if that's possible, you can't just have people who don't work or don't have much receive all the benefit.
Well, now you're arguing against people. You're saying that people should have, to some extent, have looked in 1995 when the change happened. But fundamentally, it's not just WASPI women who've been screwed over since the financial crisis. We have a 70-year high tax burden. Someone earning £60,000 this year will pay more tax than someone earning £60,000 has ever had to pay before.
But Tom, you do realise this isn't the first time that we've had hugely high tax rates on income.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the people's channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 5:25. I'm Martin Daubney and this is GB News. Now, coming up, it's Easter getaway hell with drivers in 3-hour queues and airlines cancelling 400 flaming flights. I'll bring you all the latest with a travel expert coming up soon. Before that, if you want to sum up the sorry state of this country, then a video of hundreds of kids running amok in a shopping centre yesterday surely sums it up. The children clashed with security staff in Milton Keynes, as you can see on your screen now. Police issued a dispersal order after the incident, which involved around 300 youngsters who simply ran amok. Now, to find out if classrooms have anything to do with this, I'm joined by maths teacher and great friend of the show, Bobby Siegel. Bobby, welcome to the show. Hope you're having a great Easter so far, my friend. Before we get on to where schools are culpable or not in this, can you explain to me, as a teacher with great experience, have children changed? Are the types of kids coming into classrooms changed? Is there a bigger problem with discipline and respect now as to opposed to before?
Good afternoon, Martin. So I've been a teacher now in secondary and sixth form for more than a decade. And you know me, I've spoken to you many times. I'm usually a very positive advocate for young people and the force of change they can be. But the reality is, over my 10 years in teaching, there has been a gradual degradation of pupil behaviour, generally, not just that I've seen, but my friends who are teachers, and we've seen nationally, like the video you're showing on the channel. And I think when you're trying to look at the causes, there are multiple things. One is, I still think that parents need to take greater responsibility. If you're, I think it's a privilege to have children. If you have children, you need to make sure that you are supporting, managing them, looking after them, and giving them the best possible chance to be responsible young adults. And clearly, some of the images and the video show that these parents are not being responsible. I also think the pandemic has played a role in sort of worsening behavior, because I think we've seen that young people in the lockdown, they weren't necessarily listening to rules or regulations in schools. They were just doing things on their phone. Socialization skills were down. So I think this has contributed to worsening behavior. And I think technology, again, I love technology. I think it's a powerful good. But if you're looking at all these video clips here, there are lots of young people on their phones, recording it, sharing it on social media, on TikTok and Snapchat. And they're almost being egged on to create further havoc because they can share clips on social media. So in my 10 years in teaching, I definitely think, on the whole, behaviour is getting more and more challenging, which is why we're seeing teachers leaving the profession. Teachers don't leave because they don't like teaching maths or English history, but because of behaviour in the class. And in fact, Martin, last week, or this week, I think, a survey came out reporting from 9,000 teachers, and they found that 1 in 5 teachers in England were hit by a pupil. That's remarkable. 1 in 5 teachers were hit by a pupil. And I think 15% of secondary teachers experienced sexual harassment from pupils. This is absolutely unacceptable. Again, I love working with children. I'm really positive about them. But these stats show a really, really sad picture of what's happening in England right now.
Bobby, I totally agree. My missus is a TA and she's often attacked at school by the youngest kids in a primary school. That's how serious it is. My mum was also a teacher back in the 80s in some of the roughest and toughest comprehensive schools in all of Nottinghamshire. But things have changed, because back in those days, Bobby, if a kid kicked off in class, they had the power to be able to grab them by the scruff of the neck, get them out the door, shove them out of the way and contain the situation. If a teacher did that today, Bobby, they'd lose their job quicker than their feet could touch the floor. Is that the problem? Classrooms have gone soft.
So again, this is a challenging one, because I definitely think, like when I was in school, I once had a teacher throw the chalkboard dusters at my head, or towards me. There was a student being naughty. I don't think that's the right thing to do, but I definitely think nowadays the sort of balance of power between pupils and teachers have flipped completely. Because before, maybe teachers had too much power, but now teachers have no power. Again, I've seen many incidents in my time where pupils will do things that would normally warrant suspension, possibly expulsion, but all that happens is they get talked to by senior management, and then 10 minutes later they're back in your class and they're smirking away because they've caused chaos in your classroom. So I think there needs to be a big redress of the balance between pupil and teacher power, because teachers should, it's their classroom, and that student, when they're causing disruption, they're not just impacting that student, they're impacting all other 30 students. When we're talking about academic results going down, behavior is the single biggest thing that makes people as teachers not want to stay in or join the profession.
I totally agree with that, and the aspiration of the whole group sinks when we have disruptive individuals amongst them. Bobby, you're a smart fella. I respect your opinion. You've got a minute. What are we going to do about this? How do we sort this out?
I think it's trying to give more power back to teachers in terms of sanctioning and punishment, and also responsibility of the parents. So one is in terms of punishment. I think we're a bit too soft in terms of, often if there's a misbehaving child, there's a little conversation and they come back into the class. No, if someone's causing chaos in the class, they shouldn't be allowed back in that classroom in that particular lesson. And then secondly, I think parents need to take greater responsibility, because they're the ones who are raising the children at home. If mum and dad don't take responsibility, then what are they there for? So I think, teachers should have more power in the classroom, and whether it's fines or sanctions, but parents definitely need to, get that proverbial smack on the wrist, because they're clearly not caring if you're seeing instances like Milton Keynes with 300 kids running amok.
Okay, Bobby Seagull, always an absolute pleasure to speak to you. Have a fantastic Easter, and I'll even overlook that West Ham shirt in the background, as I always do. Always a pleasure to have you on the show. Now, there's lots more still to come between now and 6 o'clock, and I'll be joined by an award-winning chocolatier. And I might even get stuck into some tasty Easter eggs myself. Yum. But first, it's time for your latest news headlines with Sam Francis.
Martin, thank you very much. Just coming up to 5:32, the headlines this half hour. Sir Jeffrey Donaldson has stepped down as the leader of the Democratic Unionist Party after he was charged with historical sex offences. A 57-year-old woman has also been charged with aiding and abetting additional offences in relation to that same police investigation. Sir Jeffrey was elected to Parliament in 1997 and is the longest-serving MP in Northern Ireland. That party have now appointed Gavin Robinson as the interim leader. One of the Conservative Party's major donors has received a knighthood as part of a controversial honours list from Rishi Sunak. Mohamed Mansour gave £5 million to the Tories last year and is a senior treasurer for the party. He was knighted for what's been described as services to business, to charity and politics. A man has been charged with 2 counts of attempted murder after a stabbing at Kennington Underground Station in London. Nicholas Orlando Green, who's 35, has been remanded in custody and will appear at Highbury Corner Magistrates Court tomorrow. He's also charged with possession of a bladed article and 1 count of sexual assault after a member of the public reported being groped as the suspect left the station. Police have issued an urgent appeal to help them locate a disabled boy's specially modified van. CCTV footage shows the moment the grey van was stolen from a family in East London. The Carriazo family's 13-year-old son, Elijah, has a rare muscular condition and survives with the help of specialist medical equipment. The custom Ford Transit was used to transport his vital medical equipment. And there's been congestion on Britain's roads as holidaymakers set off for the Easter break. 2.6 million car journeys are expected today, with the M25 and the southwest routes particularly busy. The RAC says that travellers at seaside destinations in the southwest, in Devon and Cornwall, faced particularly busy conditions. Visit England, the Tourist Board expects a total of 11 million trips over the weekend that could inject up to £3 billion into the British tourism industry. Those are the latest headlines. Sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen, or you can visit our website, gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sam. Now, I've been asking you throughout the show for your emails. Now, earlier on, we did a story about the Army banning its 100-year ruling on beards. So now you can have face fuzz if you want to join the Army. Got some couple of really fascinating emails here for some beard trivia to go with your Easter egg. And Ivor says this: the main reason military personnel never grew beards Guess why? Was so that a proper seal was created around the face when wearing respirators, brackets, gas masks. Sadly, these people are now at risk should they need to don a gas mask for any reason. There you go, you live and learn. Nice bit of Easter trivia there. And secondly, Kev says this, facial fuzz trivia number 2. Did you know that sailors in the Royal Navy are allowed beards, but they're not allowed moustaches? Royal Marines are part of the Navy, but they are allowed moustaches. So there we go. You live and learn 2 things indeed. I've also been asking you throughout the show for your opinions on that video just spoke about with Bobby Seagull, teacher, that video in Milton Keynes of the children running totally amok. And we've had absolutely hundreds of emails on that point. Here's one from Jeff, who says, all these idiots are wearing school uniforms. Go to the school to get the kids, name and shame them, get them street clean or doing any disgusting job you can think of. The parents trying to make excuses for them, get them to do community service as well. So there you go, you're getting stuck into that one. Now, after my show tonight, 6 till 7, Jubes & Co. is being chaired by Dawn Neeson, who is standing in for Michelle Dewberry, and she joins me now. Welcome to the show, Dawn. What's on your menu?
Swastikas in pubs. Gongs. Got a few Easter surprises as well that involves some of the worst hot cross buns you've ever seen in your life, and facial hair.
And that's all about facial hair in the army, no doubt. Do you like a bit of facial hair, Dawn?
What, personally? I've had a shave this morning, Martin. Come on, give me a break. Yes, I like a man that looks rugged. But you look very smooth there, it has to be said.
That's it, mate, always. We'll have a great show. Dawn Neeson covering for Michelle Dewberry 6 till 7 on Jubes & Co. Now, it's not a happy Easter for everyone, of course, because some drivers are stuck in 3-hour queues while airlines have cancelled 400 flights. Chaos on the planes, trains and automobiles. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Gary King. In Surrey, the clockwise M25 looking busy after an earlier accident between Junction 8 at Reigate and 9 at Leatherhead. In Hertfordshire, the A1M northbound remains closed until the early hours of Saturday morning. That's due to works between Junction 6 at Welwyn Garden City and 7 at Stevenage South. In Berkshire, the eastbound M4 has a lane closed due to a breakdown between Junction 10 at Wokingham and 8 and 9 at Maidenhead. In Worcestershire, the southbound M5 has a lane closed due to a breakdown between Junction 5 at Droitwich and Junction 6 at Worcester. And at Renfrewshire, the westbound M8 so still busy at the moment due to some emergency barrier repairs, and that's westbound from Junction 29 at St James towards Junction 30 at Erskine Bridge. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
He's a genius. We know he's one of the few geniuses in the world. We have Mozart, we have perhaps Leonardo da Vinci. He's a genius. Of course, he's worth studying.
But Chris, did they not think that Ben Jonson wrote some of his works?
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Some people say that. There's lots of people out there who will question who wrote the plays. What's really important, of course, is the quality of the writing. And can I just add, I have some sympathy for my opponent in this debate, because I'm afraid he's going to have to justify something which many people will disagree with. But good luck to him. But I think we all know Shakespeare was a genius. I'm sure my
let's
friend
hear from Ryan.
Well.
This is Ryan Mark Parsons, who's a former star of The Apprentice. Tell us more, Ryan.
Well, I agree with the other guests. I'm not denying Shakespeare's cultural relevance and significance in history. I mean, I admire Shakespeare. But I guess in terms of his relevance, if you were to define relevance, the Oxford Dictionary says it's appropriate to the time, context and circumstances. And I think there's an argument to be had about whether Shakespeare is relevant in 2024. let's just look at the language that he uses. It's extremely archaic. It's almost elitist, because you have to have studied his works in order to understand the plays in which he wrote. So
I just want to tear my hair out when you say that. I mean,
well, it's true.
He survives for 500 years and then the Gen Zers chuck it up the wall. And you say it's not relevant.
Oh, he's more relevant than ever, because what Shakespeare does tells us about human nature. The human nature in the 16th century, or the 17th century, it was no different from today. You know, if you're looking at Vladimir Putin's headlines today, well, read Julius Caesar. Yes, the language can be difficult, but that's good, because we need to stretch children. We need to present children with things which challenge them. Don't always make life easier for children. Absolutely. No, make them stretch them a little bit.
Welcome back. It's 5:40. It's Good Friday. I'm Martin Daubney, and this is GB News. Now, there's still time to write in gbviews@gbnews.com. Of course, the one thing that's got you going today is that disgraceful video from the shopping centre in Milton Keynes. 300 kids totally out of control. Who is responsible? Now, more than 2.5 million car journeys are expected to be made today. And guess what? The good old British weather is making life even more difficult for travellers, with Storm Nelson still hitting parts of the country. Well, joining me now to talk things through about this disruption is the travel expert Sally Gethin. Sally, welcome to the show. Happy Easter. Always a pleasure to see you. Chaos, the planes, the trains and the automobiles. Shall we start first with the situation on the roads?
Yeah, so 2.6 million car journeys are expected today. And actually, the RAC is expecting possibly up to 14 million across the weekend. So you can imagine what that's going to do. It's being, the RAC is calling it Carmageddon. And there are up to 20-mile-long queues on some motorways, particularly the M4 and the M5. And obviously, the M25 is also a trouble spot on the western side. So, yeah, and the delays are occurring at the peak times, really, between 10 and 3 p.m. So if you're out on the road, it's best to try and leave early, or if you can, leave in the evening. But also, you know, the port of Dover is experiencing problems. They're coming down a little bit now. It was like 3-hour delays earlier today, but now it's around the 90-minute mark. But then when you get through border control, you also have to deal with the French border checks, which are much more stringent at the moment.
Now, Sally, I'm trying to persuade my missus that it's the best idea to leave tomorrow to make my journey, mainly as I'd like a few sherbets tonight. Tell me, that's the right thing to do, isn't it?
Well, if you're going out on the roads, actually, tomorrow is the second busiest day for travelling. So 2.34 million trips tomorrow and Sunday. I think what it is that we've had the Easter break coincide with the schools breaking up and all those families hitting the road and trying to get away at this time. And also, you know, last year was really bad with congestion, as I mentioned about the Port of Dover. I think this year people think, well, you know, I deserve a break. I really need to get away. And, yeah, it's causing bottlenecks.
Yeah, that's it. So, Sally Gethin, I'll definitely be telling the missus it's a much wiser idea to go tomorrow than tonight. Thanks for that. Now, what about flight delays? There's some devastation going on there, is there?
Well, there are some flights affected due to some unions and strikes on the European continent. So if you're going to Austria or Spain, you could be badly affected by that. I mean, in terms of UK airports, 2 million passengers are expected to leave UK airports, right? And they've all got to come back at some point, and they're likely to come back, obviously, at the end of the Easter break, but going through to next week. So there's certain airports that are really expecting a lot more in terms of the travel, and that's particularly Bristol Airport and Newcastle and Edinburgh. And of course, Manchester is expecting many people too. I mean, one thing to think about with airports, and especially with Heathrow, that we've got border force strikes coming up after the Easter break as well. So you can expect disruption to occur even after the Easter break.
Yeah, although let's not forget, Sally Gethin, the last time Border Force were on strike, things were actually better at the airports because the armed services stepped in. Sally, could I ask you about a story that we saw in the papers today, concerned us a bit, about a drone over, in the airspace around Heathrow. What on earth are drones doing in British airspace like this, near airports?
It is a bit of a shock to the system to read about this, but if you remember several years ago, prior to the pandemic, there was a big drone scare at Gatwick, which grounded flights for days. I mean, the security industry is always on the back foot trying to catch up with the drone technology and to track them. Now, in the meantime, the regulator, the CAA, has introduced very stringent drone rules. So you've got to actually register your drone if it's over 250 grams in weight and pass an exam, right, to fly it. So how could this happen? Well, it does seem to have happened, and it got so close to the aircraft itself. It seems from the pilot's account that it looked as if, somebody was trying to get very close footage of the aircraft and was actually flying down one side of it, only 5 feet away from the actual aircraft itself. And it was on the approach path coming from Greece, trying to enter a stack, so to go into a holding pattern before it came into the airport. So the passengers probably wouldn't have been aware of it at all, but definitely does need reporting. And the problem is tracking down the culprit now, how to do that. And like I said, it's very hard for security and tech companies to be able to track those rogue drone operators.
OK, fascinating stuff. Sally Gethin, thanks for the update. Utterly moronic. People flying a drone near a plane, of course, if that gets sucked into an engine, could be chaos. They should have the full force of the law thrown at them, surely. Now, nothing really says Easter apart from travel chaos, like a delicious chocolate egg. And shortly, I'll be joined by an award-winning chocolatier. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Britain's News.
I'm Emily Carver. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast on the Metawest. Well, this Easter weekend, for many of us, we will see some sunshine, but there will still be some rain around. It's all courtesy of this area of low pressure. It's going to hang around for the long weekend, but with winds coming in from the south, it should feel a little bit less cold than it has been of late. So for the rest of Good Friday, showers becoming increasingly restricted to more western and northern parts of the country. Central and eastern parts turning dry overnight. Could just see a few misty patches come dawn, and also a touch of ground frost with temperatures falling down to about 3 to 4 degrees. But where we do see the chilly conditions first thing Saturday morning, we will see some sunshine. Just keeping an eye on this area of rain. It could just fringe the far east of East Anglia for a time, but I think for most of us, really, it's going to be a day of sunny spells and a few showers. Showers a little bit fewer and further between compared to today, with the main focus across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. But in the sunshine, feeling pleasant enough, highs reaching around 14 or 15 degrees. Then looking ahead to Easter Day, again, another day of sunny spells and showers. Showers probably, again, restricted to Northern Ireland, with fewer and further showers the further east you go. In the sunshine, feeling pleasantly warm, highs reaching around 16 degrees. And then looking ahead to Easter Monday, looks like another band of rain moving up from the south.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQs Live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQs Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
I'm Patrick Christys. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christys Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christys Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. 5:50, you're on the final furlong. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, here's the best part of the show, but looking forward to it all day. Lip looking good. Yes, I'm about to get stuck into some delicious Easter eggs, but this isn't just a chance for me to stuff my kisser full of chocolate. No, I'm going to find out lots about chocolates from a real expert. David Greenwood-Hay is an award-winning chocolatier, and he joins me now. Welcome to the show, and a very happy Easter to you. Now then, let's get down some brass tacks, can we? How big is the Easter egg market? How important is it to the chocolate industry?
It's £80 million. It's 10% of all the chocolate consumed in the UK is consumed at Easter. So really important.
That is a lot of chocolate. Now, I've noticed the price of everything is going up at the moment, but Easter eggs seem to be going through the roof. Anything driving this extreme inflation?
Yeah, we've got climate change is obviously causing problems, and it put huge pressures on this year's crop. So that started the speculators in the city hedging and buying cocoa and then holding on to it to drive the price up. It's gone from $3,000 a ton to 2 days ago it was $10,000 a ton.
So there's been a trebling in price of cocoa powder that goes into it. That's why we're all complaining that the price of our eggs have gone up, David. That's it. It's climate change and it's city traders trying to ruin it.
Well, the problem is the cocoa farmers in Ghana don't get any more money, so they're still receiving $1,600 a ton.
All right, so what's the perfect chocolate, Dave?
The perfect chocolate, I would say, is a single origin chocolate made by one of the small batch makers, maybe someone like Bullion in Sheffield or Duffy over in Grimsby. There's two fabulous girls in Manchester called Dormouse who make some amazing chocolate. There are lots of others, but there are three standout chocolate makers there that are doing small artisan, paying the proper price to farmers.
Okay.
Making a real difference.
Now, David, this is a question I've long wanted the answer to. Is there the perfect way to open an egg? Because this, my old son, is how I do it. I do it just like that, right? And then I do it just like that, and I put it in my kisser. And I get my kids to do that. And a little tip, if you're watching at home, be careful if you put your eggs in the fridge. It's like headbutting a breeze block.
I've been at quite a Swiss holiday camp in Wales, and where some of the villas are £800,000 each to have a seaside villa. And I've been teaching children how to taste chocolate properly rather than just eat it. And I didn't teach them that technique. Maybe tomorrow's lessons I'll include that.
I'm deadly serious. That is how I open Easter eggs with my kids. It becomes like part of the fun. And I quite like if you throw it in the air and do like a proper diving header, although the cat can get injured.
Well, you may lose some chocolates, of course.
Superb stuff. I tell you what, mate, it's been great talking to you. So, is this like your Christmas then? You make loads of wonga off Easter, do you?
Yeah, well, but the factories are now making Christmas. So the Easter eggs we're consuming now were made in June. So, and some of that would have been made with cocoa when it was cheaper.
Yeah, well, they don't survive that long run. They don't survive that long run, I'll tell you that much for free. David Greenwood, hey, thank you very much for joining us. An award-winning chocolatier, and we'll get stuck into that in a minute. Right after that headbutt, it's going to taste even better. Now, I've had loads of emails this show. The thing that's really got you going is the Milton Keynes scenario. Let me quickly tell you. Bob says this: we have a lost generation because they've grown up online. Smartphones should have an age limit of 18 years. And then Jeff is saying, calm down, Martin. Don't you remember the mods, the rockers, Brighton and Hastings? What about the punk rockers? You're all getting your knickers in a twist over nothing. Well, have a very happy Easter. I'll see you back on Monday. I've been Martin Daubney. But first, it's time for your weather forecast with Craig Snell.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast on the Metaverse. Well, this Easter weekend, for many of us, we will see some sunshine, but there will still be some rain around. It's all courtesy of this area of low pressure. It's going to hang around for the long weekend, but with winds coming in from the south, it should feel a little bit less cold than it has been of late. So for the rest of Good Friday, showers becoming increasingly restricted to more western and northern parts of the country. Central and eastern parts turning dry overnight. Could just see a few misty patches come dawn, and also a touch of ground frost with temperatures falling down to about 3 to 4 degrees. But where we do see the chilly conditions first thing Saturday morning, we will see some sunshine. Just keeping an eye on this area of rain. It could just fringe the far east of East Anglia for a time, but I think for most of us, really, it's going to be a day of sunny spells and a few showers. Showers a little bit fewer and further between compared to today, with the main focus across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. But in the sunshine, feeling pleasant enough, highs reaching around 14 or 15 degrees. Then looking ahead to Easter Day, again, another day of sunny spells and showers. Showers probably, again, restricted to Northern Ireland, with fewer and further showers the further east you go. In the sunshine, feeling pleasantly warm, highs reaching around 16 degrees. And then looking ahead to Easter Monday, it looks like another band of rain moving up from the south.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Gary King. In Berkshire, the westbound M4 looking very